"If you don't mind, I have a proposal for the two of you," he said as he poured 3 glasses of champagne, as if we were about to celebrate something. "Ken, I find Clarissa to be a great talker, a wonderful dancer, and very beautiful." I started to reply, but Hudson Markey casually held up 2 fingers like he wasn't finished yet. He seemed very good at stopping people from speaking. He picked up the glasses and handed them to us. "Now, your wife told me your small business is growing fast," he said, stepping back to get his own glass. "I want to help with that. Clarissa said you need more equipment and vehicles so your business can keep growing. I want to offer you $500,000 for that growth. But in exchange, I ask for 1 evening with Clarissa." I stood there, shocked. I thought maybe he was joking or I didn't hear right. No one I'd ever met had the nerve to be so blunt. "I know," he said, walking behind his big desk. "It's a lot to take in. It's a big request, that's for sure. But believe me, I'm serious." Hearing that made me angry. "Serious," I repeated, loud enough for him and Callie to hear. It made him frown. "Before you do anything," he said, "listen to me. I can send the money to your business account tonight. Clarissa will carry her phone so you can know where she is. I ask that you don't call or try to contact her, and she won't answer if you do. She will come back to you in the morning. You'll know where we are and who she's with. I will make sure she is treated with respect. If she feels uncomfortable at any time, she can stop what's happening." I was ready to say something harsh when I felt a gentle pull on my arm. Callie, my name for Clarissa, held on to me, stopping me. "Can we find somewhere to talk in private?" she asked. Markey smiled and pointed toward the big patio next to the office. "Please, use the veranda." The warm, heavy summer night air hit me as we went outside. I realized how red my face must have been. We walked to the railing and looked out over the whole city and the boardwalk in the distance. Callie turned to me. "I know how you feel," she began softly. "I was shocked, too. But please, let's talk." "No," I said. It felt like that should end it. "Ken, don't do that," she said. "We always talk things through until we find a solution. It's a lot of money. We'd be wrong to say no right away. It's not just for new equipment and vehicles. We could hire people and become a real business, even hire an accountant. We could build a new scheduling app and a new pay site. All the things that hold us back now could be fixed in less than a month. And we could have some time just for us. We could even go to Playa del Carmen, or Belize, or see the Panama Canal, like we planned." She looked at me with a mix of hope and worry. I was stunned again. Could she really agree to this? Or was she just scared? She went on, "It will be just 1 night, maybe 10 hours from now, and then I'll be back with you. Besides, I'm the one who makes the choice." She said it as if it was all on her. That was the wrong thing to say, and my face got hot. "Yeah, you might be the one enjoying it more. This is all wrong, Callie. Do you have any idea what this will do to me, to us?" Callie looked ready to argue back. "It won't hurt us, sweetheart. I won't let it. From your side, you might be right. Yes, I might like some parts of it. I wasn't thinking clearly, and I'm sorry. I was going to say that I'm the one doing the hard part, but that's not fair. I can only imagine how hard this will be for you while I'm until I come back." "I can't believe you really want to do this with him," I said, upset. "It would break me, and I think it would ruin us." "But why?" She seemed confused. "Let me tell you what I think you already know. First, I won't fall in love with him or his money. Yes, he's charming, but so are most rich guys. He's selfish, too, just like many others. I'll give him our side of the deal, but I'll be thinking of you as much as I can. I'll think about the money and how it will help us. It's no different than when you go to the lake with your brother and friends for the weekend. And I have some fun with my toy. He'll just be a tool," she said quickly. "I won't let anyone say bad things about you, and he won't treat me badly or in any way that you don't. It's just simple, nothing more. If he tries anything wrong or if you feel bad about it, I'll leave right away and call you. Other than those things you're worried about, what else is there?" "It's the whole idea, Callie," I said, shocked. "You're talking about being close to a stranger. Our marriage never said we could do that. How can I accept that? How can a husband live knowing he let his wife do that for money to keep the business going? That thought will be with me always. I don't even know why we are talking about this." She looked out at the city, thinking. "I think I understand," she said. "We are talking because it's $500,000. First, we can change our agreement if we both agree. That's true for almost anything in the future. Second, about getting past this, what exactly do you mean? It sounds like you think I'll come back broken, like I'm not the same person." She had a point. I didn't want to agree, because I wanted to stop this before it started. It's not that, I said, maybe too fast, but he'll be there, between us, in our home, in our life. Not for me, she said firmly. I wasn't sure about that. She went on. No feelings like that. No thinking he's better than you or anything like that. If you want to focus on his money, his education, or his charm, that's your choice. But remember, I didn't marry a man like that. I married you because I love you and how you treat me, and he can't do that. All he'll do is be with me for a moment, then it's done. I was angry that she answered so fast, but I knew that was her. Yeah, you say that now, I said, bitter. But what if it's really amazing for you? You can't say there's no chance that might happen. Yes, I can, she said strongly. Look, you know I wasn't new to this when we met, and Okay, I interrupted. Am I even the best you've had? I thought now I had her, but I was wrong. She blushed, but stayed strong. All right, she said, looking right at me. I hoped we'd never have this talk. Not like this, but to answer, no. You are the best man in every way. Your kindness, your calm nature, and how much you care. You make me laugh for real. Every day I see the love you have for me in your eyes. You understand me, you notice me, and you listen. You stay calm most of the time. And this conversation is a good example. Are you the best partner I've had? No. But you are very close. When it really matters, you are number one. She stopped me completely. I stood there, surprised and unsure what to expect. I didn't know what to think. It felt like I was in a TV courtroom show and I was stuck in the middle. A sudden thought crossed my mind, but I quickly pushed it away. I don't know what to say, I said. You sound very eager, Callie. That's a bit worrying. I get that, she said. I really want the $500,000. If we agree, I know the next hours won't be easy for you. I've tried to answer all your worries. The only thing left is the idea of ownership. Don't even say that, I said firmly. I have never done or said anything that treats you like property. But you're my wife, and our vows mean we're connected for life. This idea goes against everything we promised. In some way, you're right, she said, thinking hard. That old thought pushed forward again. Let me ask you something. Would you let someone remove your right hand, the one you use most, for $500,000? No, of course not, I said, angry now. Okay, she said, as if she had me trapped again. What about your '72 Charger in the garage? Would you let someone borrow it for half a day if they promised to bring it back exactly the same for the same money? That's childish, Callie, I shouted. You're trying to compare our whole relationship to a thing. I don't feel anything like that for the car. I don't share moments with it like I do with you. The car wouldn't care. I can tell you want to do this, so I won't stop you. I don't think you are being logical. You don't understand how much this will hurt me. I know that, Ken, she said quickly. I know you very well. I'm talking about these things now, not to change your mind, but so I can bring them up again after tonight if we choose to move forward. I expect tomorrow won't be good for us. I know you're not the kind of man who wants to take back his wife like a possession. I can see it will be a hard week or two. But this is life-changing money, and once you realize your fears are wrong, our love will win. We will get back to us. I was silent. She had thought of everything. She really wanted this. I couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't just about the money. She clearly didn't understand how men think, or at least how I think. In the quiet, I saw her expression change a little. That thought kept hitting my mind. Well, she said finally, are we going to accept his offer or not? I had only seen that famous movie once. Callie and I watched it at home years ago. I can't say exactly how I felt then, but when it reached this part, I was screaming inside at Woody Harrelson, "Don't! You're making a mistake!" I learned that it's very different watching something like this happen to someone else. It was a lot of money, but I figured a guy like Marky was probably offering less than he should, given what was at stake. Maybe Callie didn't fully understand, but Hudson Marky was just a man, like me. He knew exactly what he was taking and how it would affect me. I planned to use this to my advantage. With a deep sigh, I said, "Okay, Callie, it looks like you've made up your mind. I need you to listen carefully. This will change things between us, not just for a short time and not just about the money. Our special bond, the one only for each other, is gone now. Maybe we can fix it someday, but things will never be the same. If things don't go the way you hope, I don't want you complaining or acting upset. Let it happen in its own time. If I feel like you're overreacting or acting like I'm the one feeling sorry, then that's the end for us." She started to nod like she understood, but I kept going. Also, If you ever see him again after tonight, talk to him, even in secret. You're done. That's my limit. You say it's just one night, like a favor or something, so stick to that." She nodded slowly, unsure. "Next, he doesn't get your phone number back after tonight." I said it with air quotes. "If I don't want to be close with you, then respect my space. I don't want any quiet hints or secret attempts to connect. And believe me, I will notice." She almost shouted, "That's not fair, you know that. I love teasing you. It's part of us." I said, "How about we use a word or one of your serious looks if you don't want it? I can understand that. But I can't handle a big hit like that to my pride." "You're forgetting something," I added. "We had closeness before all this. I don't think you realize that everything we shared, the jokes, the closeness, will be different now. Maybe if you understood, you wouldn't want this." She looked down and said, I know. That's what I'm asking you to do, isn't it?" For a moment, she seemed like she might change her mind, but she didn't. "Okay, honey. Anything else?" "One last thing," I said. "When we're with him, I plan to keep an eye on things. And you need to keep quiet about it, or the whole deal is off. To me, you're worth way more than that money. You're my wife." That seemed to bother her, but she gave a small smile and a hug. "Trust me, we will be fine. You are my only one. He could never compare, and I'll be laughing if he tries to." That didn't make me feel better, but by then I was set. I wasn't feeling the way I thought I would. I let go of her, and holding her hand tight, we went inside. Marky was there, but a new man stood with him. He didn't look like a usual guard, but his suit barely fit over his large arms and chest. "Ah," Hudson said. "There you are. I hoped you hadn't left." What a cheesy line. He knew there was only one way out of the veranda, through the office. "This is my associate, Mr. Smith," he said smoothly. "He's here to finish the banking part, depending on what you decide." I had to admit, he was smooth. "We talked about this," I said. "I thought I'd be nervous, but I was too mad for that. I just tried not to show it. I don't think 500 is enough. Callie means too much to me. You should put on your serious face and make it $1 million. "Ah, a negotiation?" He smiled warmly, as if he expected that. "All right. But listen to this before you hear my next offer. I could call a fancy escort, even several I've met over the years, and have a great night for, say, $1,000. But they wouldn't be Clarissa, so let's say 7. He was probably good at business deals, and I guessed he'd done this kind of thing before with other couples. But he didn't know me at all. "Let's get to the point, Marky," I said, standing up a little straighter. "I think my wife is priceless. You're the one making the offer, and you knew how I felt from the start. An escort works alone, without a husband like me involved. I'll be polite for now. Make it $850,000, no more bargaining, or we're done here." For a moment, I thought I had him, but he called my bluff. $750,000, he said, like we were at an auction. I turned to leave. Callie had been squeezing my arm tightly the whole time, as if to say silently, "Don't mess this up." Now I had to almost pull her along as we walked toward the door. Then she whispered sharply, "What are you doing?" "Wait," I heard behind us. It sounded firm, not desperate. I stopped and looked back. $850 it is. I turned again, and we walked back to where we had been standing. "You drive a hard bargain, Ken." He looked at his assistant, who opened a laptop case on the desk. "All right," he said, sounding like he was in charge again. "From the end of this transfer until tomorrow morning, you will have her location, just in case of emergency, but no calls or texts. I'm paying you both well, so I expect privacy. Agreed?" I nodded. "Do you have something with your account number for the deposit?" Callie was quick, pulling a check from her purse that was meant for a charity event that night. She was about to hand it over, but I grabbed her arm before she could. "No," I said to her. "Let me." I pulled a folded check from my pocket and gave it to Marky. "What's that?" Callie asked, sounding doubtful. "That," I said, "was me being generous before we left home. I didn't want to use money from our joint or business accounts. This is from my own savings, from before we got married." She didn't know that, but the way I said it made her wonder if she'd missed something. She quickly recovered. "No, Ken," she said, sounding sorry but also a little pitying, maybe without realizing it. "I can't let you spend your own money on the charity, and this check should go into our account." She said "our" clearly. I made my move. Callie saw herself as a strong, independent woman. Not a feminist, but modern in every way. I ignored her and kept the check in Marky's hand. "No," I don't think so, I said, looking Marky right in the eyes. I don't want that money in our joint account, and definitely not in the business account. Our joint account is linked to the business bank. I don't want to explain this situation to our tax person or anyone else. I'm sure you understand. Marky didn't know what to say. For the first time that night, he seemed unsure. I suppose, he said. Then he looked at Callie. Are you okay with this? The money is meant for both of you, for the business. That's the whole point. It wasn't the whole point, not close. I could tell by the look they gave each other. My guard went up again. Why wouldn't she accept this? What were the silent signals about? What was I missing? Finally, I looked at my wife, pretending to ask for her approval. I guess, she said slowly. That makes sense. She looked nervous, maybe like an animal trapped inside. Suddenly, I noticed she didn't fully trust me. She was upset, I could tell, but she didn't show it right away. All right, I said, feeling confident. We all agree. Marky gave the check to his assistant to enter the bank details. Oh, I added quickly. One more thing. Please deposit $849,980. Everyone in the room looked shocked. Their eyes asked, why, without speaking. Condoms, I said plainly. You'll need them. Marky almost lost his cool. Callie didn't look any happier. That's rude, he said sharply. I'm taking Clarissa on my private plane to Dulles. We'll stay in the penthouse suite of a hotel with a view of the Capitol and Lincoln Memorial. I think I can handle that kind of expense. I'm sure you can, I answered. But it's about responsibility. I'm the husband. So I want to make sure things are taken care of, since I know you could both get caught up in the moment. That stopped him. At last, the man handed my check back to Hudson, who gave it to me. The assistant turned the computer screen so I could see the transfer was complete. It's done, I said quietly. I didn't feel calm inside. I'm going to leave this check on the table near the stage and slip out quickly. I suggest you two do the same. Don't stay too long. Otherwise, you'll have to pay extra for me to keep my pride. Without waiting for a reply, I kissed Callie gently on the forehead and turned to go. Suddenly, she said, Wait. She met me halfway to the door, wrapped her arms around me, and gave me a deep kiss, which I returned without much feeling. I didn't want to cause a fight before I understood what was going on. I love you, she whispered close to my ear. Don't forget that tonight, or ever. I'll be back before you know it. Strange words. I'll see you in the morning, I said softly. I wasn't sure if she noticed I didn't say I love you back. Those looks between them still stayed in my mind. I turned and left, thinking about the choice I had made. There was nothing interesting on the ceiling except the fancy crown molding with gold leaves decorating it, she thought. Breaking her daydream, she glanced at the clock on the nightstand. Then she looked the other way to see Hudson lying there, still resting. I think you broke your promise, she said with a pleased smile. You're not getting me back by morning. It's already 9:30. Clarissa had just left to take a shower after their early morning time together, feeling tired and shaky. A few minutes later, Hudson Markey joined her. The man never seemed to get enough. After 3 rounds the night before and very little sleep, Hudson woke her early, close to her. Then later, when they both woke again, he followed her to the shower, and they were together again for the 5th time. Try to blame me, Hudson said, sitting up. Then his expression changed and became serious. What? Callie asked, worried. Your husband, he said. He's not the man you told me about. You better not be playing some kind of game with me, or with yourself, or both of you. It won't end well. What do you mean, Hudson? She asked, sitting up too. Why do you think that? Clarissa, he said. I've been around a long time. He was calm, cool, and steady through everything. It was like he knew exactly what was going on, like he was used to this kind of situation. That look in his eyes, I've seen it many times before. Oh, come on, Clarissa snapped. That was just me on the porch, shutting down all his questions and worries. By the time we came back inside, he was already doing exactly what I wanted. Give me some credit, okay? I know my husband better than you ever will. He only understands what we've taught him. And yet, the man said, my money is in what I assume is his own account, one you don't have access to. The man who had been making things difficult all night now looked serious, and I didn't like it. He added, I don't get why you're making such a fuss. If he's a bad husband, just divorce him and take half the business or more. Need a good lawyer? Don't be silly, I said, annoyed. I never said he was bad. He's a great husband and will be a good father someday. I stopped for a moment. He might not be as experienced as you, but he's perfect for me. You're the silly one now, Marky said. Or maybe you're not seeing things clearly. Divorce him, marry me instead. I'll give you children. I laughed. I'm sure you could, I teased. But would you love and care for them? Or just see them as your heirs? He frowned. Then why all this trouble? I sighed. Ambition, I said softly, then a little louder. He doesn't have enough ambition. He's good to me in every other way. I've done most of the work to grow our business, and now we need your money to expand. I have my life planned. 2 kids, about 2 years apart. Their school, our retirement. I even picture the house with a white picket fence. That's ridiculous, he laughed. And very typical woman. If you ever run for office, remind me to take my business elsewhere. I tried again. He's my husband. He will give me access to your money. Our money. Hudson, don't get paranoid. I've got this under control. For the first time, Marky was rough with me. He grabbed my cheeks hard. You better be sure you do, he said coldly. You know what I want. Most of my money back and a big share of the business is a tax thing. If you or anyone else tries to cheat me, forget about kids. Then he let go and pushed my face away. I was angry, not scared, but deep down I was. Hudson had never treated me like that before. I'm going to take a shower, I told him, steaming mad. No, you're not, Hudson said with a nasty smile. I need to get you home so we don't make your husband more upset. We'll be there past noon anyway. I wasn't fooled. You jerk! I can't go home with you after what happened. He'll be furious with both of us. What kind of sick game is this? No game, Hudson said, still grinning. If your husband gets suspicious and starts to figure things out, you can tell him I have a strange personal interest. It's partly true. It might keep him from asking too many questions. Remember, don't mess this up. I cleaned up as best I could, first in the bathroom, then again at the airport. Hudson had made everything difficult, and I didn't understand why. It was already 12:30, and we still had a drive ahead. I expected Ken to be really upset. I tried to calm my mind and think about what to say to Ken, but my thoughts kept going back to what Hudson had said. For myself, I knew exactly what I wanted and needed. The business, whether that seemed strange or not, had made almost $700,000 in its first 2 years. The rich neighborhoods, especially Ironbound and Forest Hill, made it easy for dog grooming. Callie and Ken knew they needed to work with 2 kennels nearby, taking 10% from each customer they sent. The good and bad part was the number of people. The traffic was a problem almost every day. Callie thought they needed more vehicles. She guessed they could more than double their money in a year with 2 new vans. With that, they could buy a 4th van and become a real $1 million business. The problem was getting the money. 4 months ago, Callie met Hudson Mackey at a charity event, where she was invited by one of her rich clients. That meeting gave her hope for the money she needed. The problem was Hudson. He didn't want to give a normal loan. Callie laughed to herself, thinking how unusual his offer was. The fact she thought about it showed how ambitious she was. After their first lunch, she checked the numbers again and again. Things started to go wrong at their second lunch. When Callie left, she forgot about a one-time night they had together, which didn't mean much to her. Hudson needed a tax break for that year. Then he told Callie she had to let him become a 1/3 owner next year. By joining the business and changing the way it worked, with him as the main owner, he would have fewer problems with the government if Nancy Kegel, a new political candidate, won in November. She promised a heavy tax on the wealthy. That night at home, Callie could hardly act normal. Ken, who always noticed things, quickly asked what was wrong. Callie made up a simple lie about a sick friend at the charity. If she had been as sharp as Ken, she might have seen that it wasn't the first lie. She had been hiding things from him for over a week, and she was making plans without telling him. The next day, Callie felt better by late afternoon. She was back working hard on the numbers, and even with Hudson as a partner, she believed she and Ken could reach their goal with hard work and smart workers. The hard part was how to accept Hudson's strange offer and make him a partner just months later. That would be very hard to explain to Ken. At first, she thought she could say they got extra money for the business and maybe sold part to Hudson. At their third lunch, Hudson used his business skill to explain how to hide some of the money he would pay for his quick part in the business. The lies kept growing. The whole plan wasn't finished yet, and Callie was already in trouble. Hudson's interest had led Ken to negotiate for her without her knowing. That made her feel bad. Even worse, Ken now had more money than needed to buy the new vehicles and equipment. How could she make Hudson an equal partner? What reason did Ken have to agree? Callie decided to handle it her usual way. She pictured where she was now and where she wanted to be, then thought of all the steps in between. She knew she had to act like it was her and Ken together against Hudson. The limo stopped at the house, and Callie's heart beat faster. Everything outside looked normal, but she knew it wasn't. When she stepped inside, the house was quiet. Maybe Ken had left, or maybe he was still asleep after a very rough night. Callie moved quietly through the living room and dining room. Everything was quiet. Then she went into the kitchen and almost jumped back. Ken was sitting in the breakfast nook, staring out the big window without looking at anything in particular. He didn't even notice her. "Ken?" she said, worried. "Nice to see you finally made it home," he said in a cold voice she didn't expect. He still didn't look at her. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said quickly, realizing things were worse than she thought. "The airport and traffic." "Yes, sure." He cut her off sharply, almost mocking her. She knew now it wasn't just bad. It was as bad as it could be. "I'm sorry," she said again, stepping a little closer. Ken stood up and walked away toward the coffee pot. "Everyone's sorry, Cal," he said sadly. "Including me?" "Don't say that, please," she said quietly. She knew just trying to calm him wouldn't work, but it was hard not to try. "It's over now," she added. "I knew today would be hard after what we agreed on. I told you I would give you space, but after the night I had, I need you to just hold me for a minute. I need to feel that we still care. It was hard for me, too." Ken laughed, but it was a strange, bitter laugh, not one to hurt her on purpose, just real and painful. "Did you both think it was funny to break the rules? Did he talk badly about me as he spent time with you? Did you lie last night?" He paused. "I saw you two on the dance floor before you told me about the plan. I saw how you looked at him, with respect and something else. The plan made me forget. But when I got home, I remembered. Please, don't do this," she begged. "Don't shut me out. We're in this together. I know I said I'd give you space, but don't push me away." "But it's different now, isn't it?" he said. "You got home so late. Promises were broken. Tell me what really happened last night." "No," she whispered, mostly to herself. "I said I would tell you everything. I will, just not like this. Not now. You're upset and it's still too fresh." "Fine." His voice was low. "Then tell me this. Was it this morning?" This wasn't how she wanted their meeting to go. She stepped toward him, hoping to hold him. "No more talking. Just hold me, please." But Ken stepped back as she moved forward. His hurt changed into anger. "What?" she said sharply. "You think I'm dirty? You don't want to touch me?" "I don't know, Callie," he said flatly. "Is that why you were so late?" We spent time together this morning," she said slowly, unsure how to explain. "He wanted something more. The girlfriend time, I guess. He paid a lot." No matter how she said it, her words felt wrong. "If you both spent all night like that, then there's only one reason he'd want you again this morning. That means you broke a major rule. You brought him here. How could you do that? Go away and clean up. Now." His words hit her hard, like a shock. This side of Ken was new and cold, but deep down she knew he wasn't wrong. He had understood the truth quickly. Under the warm water in the shower, Callie tried to calm down. What happened between them felt so strange she couldn't think straight. Her mind kept going over their talk again and again. She was glad he told her to clean up, even if he said it in a harsh way. She was angry, too, at Hudson for causing trouble and leaving her no choice. He almost ruined everything with his careless behavior. As she washed herself quickly, her mind cleared, and she saw that things had changed a lot. The gap between where she was and where she wanted to be felt much bigger now. She thought it would be good to see someone else, but if Ken didn't want to talk, she would leave and let him deal with his feelings. The worst thing would be if either of them said or did something they would regret later. She dressed simply and decided to go to the mall to walk around and clear her thoughts. Ken had moved to the living room. Callie sat down on the couch, careful not to sit too close, but close enough if he needed her. "I love you, Ken," she said softly. She really meant it. "I'm sorry we broke the rules, and I'm home now, so—" "Don't try that," he warned. "You already said that. There won't be any hugs or peace today. Those rules you broke are your fault and his. You could have come home to hugs, but no. You made a bad night worse. Why did you let him surprise you like that when I told you not to?" Callie stopped him. "I didn't let him," she said. "I was in the shower. He just came in and surprised me. He kissed me. I don't want to say more because it will only hurt you. He started things, and before I knew it, we were together." Only after did I realize there was no protection. And he couldn't wait while you finished showering? No, she remembered. He took me back to the bedroom after we started and said we had to leave soon to catch a plane. And you didn't think about that. It was his private plane, so no real schedule. At that moment, Callie knew there was no fixing anything that day. It was better not to try. Do you want me to leave for a while? She asked. What I want is for you to make a doctor's appointment and get tested, he said coldly. No touching or anything until I see the results. That man acted like this was normal for him. Remember, those were my rules and you still broke them. Callie was shocked, but she understood. She nodded, stood up, took her purse, and walked to the door. As she walked down the street, she looked at her phone. A message from Hudson appeared. Everything had changed, and she knew what to do after she answered him. His simple question was, how did it go? Not well, she said to the car's hands-free speaker. He found out what you did and confronted me. It's a mess. A moment later, her phone buzzed. Are you alone? She said yes, and then her phone rang. I told you, he said without greeting. I knew it. Ken is smarter than you thought. What do you mean? She felt the stress of the last day weighing on her. What did Ken do before joining you in the dog grooming business? I told you. He was an accountant, she said, frustrated. Where? Where did he work? Callie was tired and upset. I don't remember, she said sharply. It was in Manhattan, and the firm had a strange name. Find out and tell me as soon as you can, he said. She snapped back. We had all this planned out, you know, but you messed it up, trying to make me take your problem home. Ken saw right through you the moment I walked in. Who you thought he was has changed into a cold and tough negotiator who made you raise your offer. There was sarcasm, coldness, and a strong focus on one thing only. It surprised me so much that I had no choice but to be honest. That's because you made him look clueless, he snapped back. I would never, she said, shocked. I love him. I had this all planned, and now you've set me back a long way. I'm going to have to ask for forgiveness for a long time. He even told me to get tested for diseases, you jerk. Hudson didn't react and spoke over her. He's got my money, Clarissa. Our money, Callie interrupted. Ours, Hudson. No. He was getting angry now. Once you get him to talk, I bet those funds were sent to a bank account you can't touch. That means it's my money until you get it back in your shared account. That's for me to figure out, she said, not fully understanding the warning. I love my husband. I did this for us, him and me, and yes, I know what you want from it. I have plans for the business, kids, a big house, and good schools. As I said this morning, if you wanted those things, why not just leave him and let me give you what you need? Because, she laughed, I'm not in love with you. That's hard to believe, he said with a smile. Last night and this morning are still in my mind. You didn't act like it was just a casual thing. You kept coming back to me all night, every time. So, you were interested. And this morning in the shower, I was sure you wanted it as much as I did. You were far from quiet. Since we got to the room, you've been as strong and sure as I am. So, no more lies. You can't say you don't want this again, whether your husband knows or not. Leave him and let me give you everything you want. You know that will never happen, she said clearly. All right, he changed his tone. Then let's move on. You need to start asking for forgiveness now. I'm on a tight schedule since it's almost the end of August. Don't underestimate me, Clarissa. It was close to $1 million, and that's a lot of money I wasn't expecting. Get that money back and start getting ready to make me a full partner in February, no matter what it takes. Are you threatening me? She asked in shock. I am, he said firmly. I won't lose in this deal. If either of you, or both of you, try to cheat me out of our agreement, you'll both see that you're in over your heads fast. I can make things very difficult for both of you. I'll get your money, she said just to calm him down. Don't call or text me on this phone. We'll talk at our usual time. I was asked last night to help at the charity, so that's where we'll meet. I'm not involved in the charity, except as a big donor. Meeting you there would bring too much attention. Then you know when the meetings happen. Contact me then, or buy me a phone and send it to my office. They made some general plans and ended the call. Callie quickly pulled over, clicked on Hudson's name, edited his contact info, changed his name to Carol, and deleted all their past messages. She spent the afternoon pretending to shop while making new plans to get back on track. But Ken wouldn't make things easy for her. She expected him to be cold for the rest of the day, maybe even for several days after. What she didn't expect was to find all her clothes and personal care items neatly placed on the bed in the spare room. "What do you think you're doing, Ken?" she asked sharply as she came down the stairs. He stood at the kitchen sink with his back to her. "I'm just washing my hands after working outside," he said quietly. His voice was too calm, different from the Ken she knew. She had expected him to say something rude, something like, "That's where troublemakers sleep, in the spare room," or some other manly nonsense. "Ken, stop it," she said firmly. "We made a promise last night, and I won't be treated like this." "You keep forgetting you broke that promise many times," he said, finally turning to her. His face was redder than she had ever seen. "Stop talking about the deal. It's over. Now, this is about how much you didn't respect our rules. You sleep in the spare room until I figure things out, or you can leave. I decide when, where, and if we fix this. I'm sure Hudson would let you stay. No doubt." Callie didn't want to argue in circles. She remembered her plan at the mall and decided not to lose control over her anger. So she went upstairs to hang up her clothes. From the window that looked out to the driveway, she watched Ken get ready for the next day. It was back to work for both of them. Ken went outside and started working on the business van. He filled the 2 big water tanks for the many stops planned for the next day. They had just had 2 days off, the first break in a long time, but Ken was angry. He had hoped those days would help bring back some closeness between them. But those hopes were now gone. After finishing, Ken came inside, grabbed his car keys and a cap, and as he headed for the door, he stopped. He went to his study and took his personal laptop. The sports bar he was going to had lots of quiet corners, perfect for digging into something. After ordering a beer and some food, Ken opened his laptop and logged in through a special secure connection using the bar's management login instead of the guest one. The next morning felt better to Callie. It seemed more normal. They worked the business together, or at least she did, like a smooth-running machine. She handled the morning appointments on a route she had carefully planned over 3 years. Ken managed the bookkeeping and started organizing appointments for the next week. Yes, they scheduled that far ahead. Around lunchtime, Callie came back, organized her call notes, updated their app, then began making dinner while also taking care of cleaning and laundry. Before dinner, Ken loaded up the van for the next day and entered his information into their planning tool. Then they sat down to eat. Ken barely spoke to her and only talked about work before she left on her route. When she came back, Ken was ready to leave and held out his hand for the keys, then hurried out. It was a hard day. She felt sad and empty, but with her plans in mind, she was determined to get through this and get their lives back on track. If she had told anyone about her plans, they might have said she was crazy or at least out of touch. That afternoon, she got another text from Hudson. He wanted to know what had changed about his money and sent more threats when she said she was working on it. Again, she warned him not to text too much or they might get caught. Ken came home as he usually did on weeknights. He refilled the water tanks and made sure they had enough supplies for the next day. When he came in, Callie asked if he wanted to go out for dinner. She didn't ask if he wanted to talk. As usual, he said no and went to take a shower. 20 minutes later, he left without saying goodbye. Callie decided to wait things out. She would watch his mood each day, knowing she had made mistakes at the start. Hudson, especially with how he was acting, could cause real trouble and ruin her plans. She needed that money moved into their shared account so she could calm Hudson down. A month passed in the blink of an eye. Callie was feeling more and more frustrated with the men in her life, her husband, and a sort of business partner. Ken had finally started talking to her without anger, which took longer than she thought. She had to admit her feelings for him had changed. Callie still loved Ken, but the new side of him that she had seen recently was not what she expected. It was hard to explain, but it was strange and surprising. Callie thought Ken would agree with what she wanted and, to be honest, follow her lead. After all, he had left a good job to join their new business. She kept telling herself that Ken was just more upset than before, which confused her deeply. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a small thought told her that she didn't really understand Ken as well as she thought. How could she have been so wrong about him? Their romantic life was still not good. The first 2 weeks, Callie was so focused on getting Ken back with her that she forgot to go to the clinic, even though Ken had asked her to. Part of her didn't like being told what to do. Then, when things seemed better, Callie tried to be close with Ken one night. But he reminded her coldly about the promise she made and warned her to be careful for his health. Callie thought this was too much, but she still made an appointment the next day. Hudson was something else. He wouldn't stop bothering her about the money, and lately his demands had gotten worse. Her soft excuses and kind words didn't work anymore. Callie found herself stuck between two very strong-willed men with very different goals. She was tired of dealing with all this. 5 weeks after that bad proposal, Callie had an appointment in a very rich part of town. When her GPS showed the address, she wasn't surprised it was Hudson's big house. It was her first time there. She didn't think he had a pet. "I told you that," she started when the door opened. But a very large man stood there instead. He was so big that his tight suit looked like it might tear. She was about to say she had an appointment with Hudson, but he turned away and led her down a long hallway to a fancy sitting room. There, Hudson was sitting on a small, fancy sofa, waiting. "Hudson, this better be about a pet cleaning," she said, but he cut her off. "No pet, I'm afraid," he said clearly. "You asked me not to contact you through messages, but I need an update, and you are going to give it." His calm voice didn't match the look in his eyes. She hesitated when he patted the seat next to him, asking her to sit. Strange as it felt, she took the seat. The big man stood near the door, arms folded calmly in front of him. "I haven't moved the money yet, if that's what you want to know," Callie said, trying to sound a bit proud and in control. "That's not what I want to hear," he said. Then he gently ran his hand through her shiny hair. "We have a deal, Clarissa. I'm very disappointed in you." "You acted like you knew how business works, at least that's how you appeared. I need that money. I told you I have a deadline. I could lose a lot of money if you don't pay what you owe me." Then he grabbed her hair and pulled her face close to his. "I won't let that happen. You're going home," he said as he touched her roughly. "And you're going to get your husband to send the money. Tonight." Hudson tugged at the front of her shirt, pulling it so it revealed her bra. "What do you think you're doing?" Callie said, angry. His hand moved to her face, holding her cheeks tightly. "You broke our deal," he said, his voice hard. "I need to be paid back right now. Take your clothes off," he said, looking at the man standing by the door, "so things don't get messy." "Are you going to force me?" Callie shouted. "I don't want to," Hudson said with a cold smile. "But since you didn't keep your end of the deal, I'm owed something. If you agree, it's not forced. You will do this until the deal is done. Now take your clothes off." Callie looked at the big man by the door, then back at Hudson's angry face and clenched fists. She realized she was in serious trouble. Okay, Hudson, I'm sorry. I see how urgent this is. I'll work on this with Ken tonight. I won't take no for an answer, I promise." "I bet you will," he laughed and stood up, lifting her at the same time. "First what we agreed on, then we talk." Callie tried to calm down. She thought about how she had already been with Hudson before, and though she wanted her husband's care and love, memories of the times with Hudson came to her mind. She pulled off her shirt. "There you go, Clarissa," he said in a soft voice. "Now take off those tight shorts and bend over the back of the sofa." Hudson didn't take off his clothes. He just opened his zipper. The other man stayed in the room, too. "Have him leave, Hudson," Callie whispered. "No, sweetie, he stays. He won't bother you unless you cause trouble. Then he's allowed to handle it as he wants." "Then hurry up," she said, angry. "You heartless man!" Callie tried to think about something nice to help her through this, but nothing came. She pushed those thoughts away. Hudson was rough and fast. Luckily for Callie, it didn't last long. When he stopped, he took her hand and moved it carefully. "Don't let that drip on my rug," he said. "The restroom is just down the hall, second door on the right." The big man followed Callie and waited in the hallway while she went to freshen up. When she came back, he stood by the door and gently pushed her back into the room, where Hudson was staring out the window. "You know," he said quietly, "I don't see you doing very well trying to get my money from your husband." "Leave me alone, Hudson," Callie said, more boldly than she felt. "I know what I'm doing. It's just taking time." "Clarissa," he turned to face her, "either you and your husband are trying some foolish trick or you're the most careless person I've ever met. I want to believe it's the first one. If it's the second, I have to question if I can understand people at all. Now tell me the truth about Ken and his work." Callie stood there, unsure what to say. What kind of game was he playing now? "Oh, come on," Hudson said, clearly annoyed. "Are you really telling me you don't know?" "Just say it, please," she said, confused and frustrated. "You said he used to be an accountant." Hudson motioned for her to sit down. When you mentioned his firm, Doonesbury and Ratcliffe, it sounded strange but also familiar. So, I asked some people to check it out. Doonesbury and Ratcliffe is the name of a famous court case. He paused and walked to a small bar, pouring himself a drink. His firm, he continued, works closely with the Department of Justice on white-collar crime. The court case involved a U.S. senator in the late 1800s who made a lot of money while in office. Many current laws about lobbyists come from that case. Your husband wasn't just an accountant. People called him the accountant because of what he really did. He is a forensic expert. His job was to quietly watch important targets without using electronics. While others searched books, bank records, and emails, your husband found smart ways to catch real-life actions to back up electronic proof. Callie sat with her mouth open, shocked. Hudson went back to the bar and got her a glass of water. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. He knew exactly what he was doing when he told us to send the money to that private account. I say private because I already checked it too. You don't have access to it. The money, my money, has been moved through many banks, some not even in the United States. He's no dog groomer, that's for sure. Hudson's voice got louder and angrier. Callie pulled back on the couch. You'll be going home soon. He paused and looked at her with hard eyes. And you're going to get me my money back. Do you understand? Callie jumped and then shifted nervously, scared for what might happen next. She also worried about her future. If Hudson was right, she didn't really know her husband at all. Now, Hudson said, in 3 weeks the election happens. It doesn't look good for my side. These people already passed a new bill, a wealth tax, and without showing a big loss on my taxes, I'll have to pay a lot if they win. I can't just move my business to another state because the bill has a penalty for that. If you and your husband try to keep my money, I'll lose even more. I want my money in the next 2 weeks, he warned. Just like we first agreed. You keep the original amount. Give me back what he agreed on. Or else. Hudson didn't say exactly what might happen, but Callie understood the seriousness. He made sure she knew that he was not joking. Hudson motioned for Callie to leave, and a large man helped her out. She barely had any clear thoughts by the time she got into her van. An hour later, Callie was still driving around town. Everything felt small and helpless. She drove around the edges of town, looking for any way out of the mess she was stuck in. She knew Hudson meant every word he said. If her husband had been someone who stood up to powerful people like Hudson, maybe her best chance was to be honest with him. He probably already knew some things. But which ones? That was the difficult part. She finally got home 2 hours later. Ken was there, as usual, waiting for his afternoon appointments. Callie saw he was in a bad mood, so she kept quiet. They would have to talk later. Maybe in the evening. She made one of his favorite meals. It wasn't heavy in case the conversation went badly. She took a long, hot shower to clear her mind and wash away the stress from earlier. Finally, Ken came home just after 6. Honey, please get cleaned up and come join me for dinner, he said. She tried to keep her tone bright but couldn't. We have a lot to talk about. Ken stared at her for a long moment, sighed, and then went upstairs. He came back with a serious look on his face. Callie thought for a moment. This talk was long overdue. She served the food and poured 2 glasses of wine before sitting down. After about 10 minutes, she felt like she was about to burst. Honey, she started, we need to talk about the money. We should start using it now. I've been looking at new trucks, and I want to hire 1 or 2 people. Ken put his fork down and looked at her. There won't be any trucks or new hires, he said firmly, like he was talking to a child. Of course there will be, she said, but he cut her off. No, he said again, calm and quiet. Callie wanted to say many things, but her control started to slip. Don't say no, Ken, she said coldly. That money belongs to both of us, not just you. I'm the one who had to put up with that man, not you. It's not only your money. You've been acting so unfriendly for weeks now. I'm starting to question if you still care about me. You've been rude and cold. It's making me doubt my feelings for you. She was just getting going when Ken stopped her. Rude? He asked, shocked. What have you been doing without telling me? Why are you meeting Hudson and talking to him on the phone? I thought it was over after the first time. Callie leaned back, surprised, then remembered what Hudson had said. Don't act like you're better than me, she said. Why didn't you ever tell me what you really do for work? I couldn't, he said simply. What I do is secret and still is. So you decided to marry me while keeping secrets? You weren't an accountant, you lied. And now you're still lying about something, and it's about our money. Why were you at that man's house this afternoon, Callie? And don't say it was to take care of a dog. He doesn't have one. The tension was clear between them. He's upset about the money. It's meant for both of us, plus he wants to invest in the business. Ken reached for his bag near the counter and pulled out a photo, sliding it across the table. It showed Callie leaving Hudson's house just hours before. Callie felt anger rise inside her. "You're spying on me now," she shouted. "How dare you?" Ken stayed calm. "That photo doesn't look like you two were just chatting. You look tired and upset. Did he threaten you? Did he take advantage of you again?" "What are you playing at?" she shot back. "You convinced him to ask for more money, which I ended up paying. That makes you just as bad as him. Hiding the money like that." Ken pulled out more pictures and slid them across the table. "I'm sure you want to twist this into something bad. Good luck with that." "What are these?" she asked. "I want that money moved into our joint account right now," he said firmly. "If I have to involve the police, it will be to protect both of us. Hudson's left a mark on you. He told me today. I'm not risking our lives over some stupid fight between you two." "I had big plans for that money," Callie said softly. "When he made the offer, all I saw was our future. Our business growing, starting a family on time just as we planned. A future where we could sell the business and enjoy an easy life." "And when was that exactly?" Ken asked quietly, glancing back at the photos. Callie looked down at the 3 pictures, trying to understand. At last, she recognized them from a charity event last spring. "These are from the hospital gala about 6 months ago," she told him. "That's Kurt Wellington, the richest man in town, dancing with the belle of the ball." Ken slowly reached across the table and covered the 2 dancers with his hand. "To the right," he signaled. Callie tried to focus on 2 people in the background. To her shock, she recognized them. She was holding Hudson's arm as if being escorted. She was looking up at him, laughing at something. In the next photo, they were sitting at a table near the back of the room. His hand rested on her knee. They looked like they were having a good time. In the third, they were crossing the room, holding hands. "So," she said, upset. "So, Callie, you're lying too, aren't you?" It wasn't really a question. "Is this when you two started your plan? You've been working with him for a while now, which makes me think you met him the night of your fake proposal. You only cared about your future, not ours." Callie knew the truth was out. He seemed to know most of what had happened, but that didn't mean he was right about her planning or the future she wanted. And how would I, a simple accountant, know if he was the first or the only one? How many others have there been right under my nose? I was a fool for trusting you. "Okay," she said, tired. "You've caught me, but I swear Hudson is the only one. I have only ever thought about us, about our family, and a life free from stress and money troubles." All she got back was a cold look. He began to stand up, signaling the talk was done. Callie felt desperate. "No!" she cried. "Wait! He's going to hurt us. Please, Ken. No matter what you think of me, please believe me. You know me better than I knew you. I made mistakes. He forced me to be with him today. He had someone there, and he said he would hurt me if I didn't cooperate. He threatened to ruin us if he didn't get his money back. I believe him. And why would he want the money back, Callie?" All of Callie's plans fell apart at that moment. She looked down, feeling small. "He's trying to use some tax trick. Something about the election that I don't understand. He thought you were just a simple dog groomer. He didn't expect you to be some kind of expert who could find the truth. So he could try to use us later." Ken's words weren't a question. He already knew. "I didn't know, I swear." Callie was close to tears, which made her angry too. She felt fooled and outplayed by the man she loved and the one she had feelings for. "He's not getting the money, honey." Ken smiled softly at how the words sounded. "Neither will you." Ken left the house as Callie sat there, staring ahead, confused at how everything had fallen apart so quickly. She was angry with herself for letting these 2 prideful men control her. Callie stayed still at the kitchen table, looking into the dark living room long after the front door closed. Ken was gone. The silence felt heavy, almost hard to breathe in. Her mind raced in a fast, scary circle. Ken wasn't just a tired accountant who had quit a stressful job to help her wash dogs. He was an undercover agent for the Department of Justice, a silent hunter of people like Hudson Markey. And now she had given him the perfect chance to bring them both down. She couldn't sleep. As the sun shone through the blinds, casting soft lines on the wooden floor, a plan began to form in her mind. Markey wanted his money back before the election. He had warned them that things would go badly if he didn't get it. If she could just move $849,980 from Ken's private account into their business account, she could send it to Marky. She could save herself. At exactly 8 in the morning, Callie walked into their local bank. She passed the waiting area and went straight to the marble counter. Her heart beat fast in her chest. "I need to make an immediate transfer," she said, trying to keep calm. "Clarissa Markwell, Business LLC account ending in 4402. The teller, a young woman with glasses, looked puzzled. Her fingers hovered over the keys. "One moment, Mrs. Markwell." She got up, went behind the glass, and pulled a heavy folder from a filing cabinet. She came back and slid a stack of signed papers across the counter. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Markwell. You're not allowed to access those funds or the business accounts." Callie looked at the papers. "That can't be. I'm a 50% partner. I started the company." "You were," the teller said gently, pointing to the bottom of the first page. "3 months ago, the company changed. These are the new operating agreements you signed. Kenneth Markwell is now the only person who can manage the accounts." Callie looked at her own signature on the page. Fear gripped her. 3 months ago, Ken had slipped these papers into a stack of contracts she had quickly signed without reading. He had planned this long before Marky's demands. She was legally trapped. She had lost control of the business she had built. She left the bank quickly, stepping into the morning light, struggling to breathe. A strong hand caught her shoulder. She turned to see Gus, Marky's big, tough helper who Hudson had called Mr. Smith before. Gus stood close, pressing her against the brick wall. "Where's the money?" Callie asked, voice shaking. "Ken locked it up. I can't get it." Gus didn't move his eyes. "Mr. Markey doesn't want the money." Callie froze. "What?" "The money was just a deposit," Gus said in a low voice. "He wants the vans. All of them. By midnight." He pushed her away and walked to a black SUV. Callie hurried to her car, her hands shaking as she started the engine. If Marky wanted the vans, she still had a way to fight back. She could hide them. She drove fast through town, tires screeching as she turned onto the gravel road to their leased parking lot. She opened the gate and slammed on the brakes. The parking lot was completely empty. The vans were gone. But in their place, lying in a neat row on the cracked pavement, were 4 broken black plastic squares. Ken had taken out the GPS trackers. Callie didn't have time to shout. The black SUV pulled up quietly behind her. Gus stepped out, grabbed her roughly, and pushed her into the back seat. He didn't say anything as he locked the doors and drove off. Half an hour later, the SUV sped through the gates of a private airstrip on the edge of Newark. A shiny jet waited quietly on the runway, its engines humming softly in the wind. Hudson Markey stood close by the plane's landing gear. He looked very different from the smooth, confident billionaire she had met at the charity event. His tie was loose, his hair scattered wildly around his face, and his eyes showed pure fear. Gus pulled Callie out of the SUV and pushed her toward him. "Where are the vans, Clarissa?" Markey shouted, spitting the words into the wind. "Ken took them!" she cried back, almost losing her balance. "I don't know where they are. Why do you care about the trucks? I'll get you the money. I'll get it back." Markey grabbed her jaw, his fingers pressing sharply on her skin. "I don't care about the money. I owe $20 million to a man named Sylvia Rostova. She only accepts cash and special untraceable papers. Do you know how hard it is to move that much money across state lines without being stopped by police?" Callie's eyes grew wide as the terrible truth finally came to her. The pieces of the puzzle fit together. "The water tanks. 50-gallon tanks," Markey said coldly, shaking his head a little. "Lead-lined. They can't be seen with thermal scanners. Your little dog grooming trucks cross 3 state lines every day without anyone noticing. It was the perfect cover. We just needed the money side as a mask." He let go of her jaw, turned, and slammed a wrinkled paper onto the SUV's hood. "Then your husband did this?" Callie stepped closer and looked at the paper under Markey's heavy hand. It was a real bearer bond worth $10,000. A handwritten note in Ken's neat writing was stapled on top. "Water weight is off." "He sent this to my office this morning," Markey said in a low, panicked voice. "He found the bonds I already put in the first van. He stole them. If I don't get Rostova her first payment by Friday, she'll come after me. And then after you." A heavy, strange silence fell over the airstrip, breaking the hum of the jet engines. A group of 3 black armored Escalades pulled up, surrounding Markey's SUV. Doors opened perfectly at the same time. Men in heavy gear stepped out, standing quietly around the plane. From the middle SUV, a woman came out. She wore a neat gray coat and moved with calm control. Markey swallowed hard. His proud look turned into fear. "Sylvia," he said, stepping forward. "I can explain. The shipment is safe. Clarissa is watching over it. I promise she will deliver." Sylvia Rostova did not look at Marky. Her cold eyes stayed on Callie. Callie stepped back from the plane, her heart pounding fast. While Marky begged Sylvia to be patient and explained the delays, Callie slowly moved the SUV between herself and the armed men. When Gus looked at Sylvia, Callie took off running. She ran through tall, dry grass near the airstrip, scrambled over an old chain-link fence, and dropped into a concrete ditch. She kept running until her lungs burned and her legs felt heavy. Finally, she stopped a delivery truck on the side road. She needed help from the federal government. Ken was a former agent, and the local police could not protect her, but the federal government could. An hour later, Callie rushed into the big federal building downtown. She headed straight for the security desk. "I need to report a smuggling ring," Callie said, leaning on the cold marble counter out of breath. "People are in danger. Hudson Markey is—" "Clarissa Markwell?" The voice was flat, with no warmth or rush. Callie turned around. A man in an old, wrinkled gray suit stood a few feet away. He held up a worn-out brass badge. He had thin hair, sunken cheeks, and eyes that seemed tired and watchful. "Arthur Pendleton," he said. "Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. Come with me." "IRS?" Callie said with disbelief, her heart racing. "You don't understand. Men with guns are threatening me. Hudson Markey is moving bearer bonds for a group." Pendleton grabbed her elbow firmly and led her to a small, windowless room near the lobby. He pushed her into a metal chair and placed a heavy file, thick with papers, on the table. "I don't care about Hudson Markey's threats, Mrs. Markwell," Pendleton said as he sat across from her. "I care about taxes. Specifically, the $849,980 that entered an account tied to your company's tax number last night." "That was a private account," Callie snapped, leaning forward. "Ken did that. Not me. I have no access to it. It was his money." Pendleton opened the file and slid a printed bank statement across the table. "Yes, but the money went through your business's main account for exactly 4 seconds before moving to his private reserve. That counts as a taxable event. But that's not the real issue." He leaned in, his voice low and serious. "The problem, Clarissa, is that the serial numbers on that transfer matched a known Department of Justice bait fund. Someone used flagged government money to force a strict IRS audit on your company, and by extension, on your new partner, Mr. Markey." Callie stared at the papers, feeling her strength leave her. Ken hadn't just taken the money out of anger. He had used it like a signal to bring the full power of the government down on Markey's business. "You're being set up," Pendleton said coldly, closing the file. "And honestly, I don't care. I want a case. You have 48 hours to show all the company's records for the last 3 years. If you don't, I will have you arrested for tax evasion." Callie searched her home office in frustration. She pulled open desk drawers, scattering pens and clips onto the carpet. She pounded on the computer keyboard, trying every password she could guess. But it was useless. The scheduling software, the apps, the records, all locked tight. Ken had put strong protections on the files and disappeared. She was cut off from her digital world. But Ken trusted paper more than screens. Callie went into the storage closet and pulled out 2 heavy, dusty Rolodexes from their first year in business. She carried them to the kitchen table and picked up the landline. If Ken was hiding the vans, they must still be working. A parked van would be noticed. A running van would blend in. For 3 hours, Callie called old clients in the wealthy neighborhoods of Ironbound and Forest Hill. She used a friendly, upbeat voice pretending to confirm appointments. On the 42nd call, one client complained that the groomer had just arrived and parked on her lawn. Callie slammed down the phone, grabbed her keys, and rushed outside. She found the van parked on a quiet street lined with trees in front of a large colonial house. The engine was off, but a thick black cable ran from the side of the van into the storm drain, like a homemade ground wire. Ken was sending orders to the fleet using private radio channels, completely off the usual networks. Callie walked up to the van, her breath catching. The back doors were a little open. She climbed inside. The usual smell of wet dog and shampoo was gone. Instead, there was a sharp smell of metal and machine oil. Where the big water tank used to be, there was now a strong steel box firmly attached to the van. It was welded in place and had a heavy lock, a hidden safe right inside a normal work van. "Ingenious, isn't it?" a voice said. Callie turned quickly. Her heart jumped. Gus was standing in the doorway blocking the light. His suit looked wrinkled, and he was breathing hard. "How did you find me?" Callie asked, stepping back against the cold steel of the box. "I didn't," Gus said as he stepped inside. "I found the truck. Marky sent me to get the bonds." Before Callie could move past him, Gus grabbed the door handles. He slammed the door shut, and it became completely dark. The locks clicked into place. She was trapped inside. The van started moving, throwing Callie against the cold steel. The engine growled loud as the van went fast, bouncing over the streets. Callie pushed herself up and hit the metal wall separating the front and back. "Let me out!" she shouted, but the thick metal stopped her voice. She was stuck in the dark, being tossed around as Gus drove quickly through the city. Suddenly, the radio in the front crackled. It wasn't music. It was a voice on a secret radio channel, loud enough to be heard through the metal wall. "Turn right on 4th Street, Mr. Smith," the voice said. Callie froze. It was Ken. His voice was calm, without the anger he had shown before. Gus swerved, clearly surprised. "Who is this?" he yelled, panic in his voice. "I'm the man who designed the very engine you're sitting on," Ken said evenly. "Keep pressing the gas. If you stop, the fuel line will cut." The van sped up. Callie crawled to the small window in the metal door. She saw Gus gripping the wheel tight, his eyes jumping to the dashboard. "Look in the glove box," Ken told him. Gus carefully reached over and opened the glove box. A thick brown envelope fell onto the seat. Gus tore it open quickly. "That envelope holds proof," Ken's voice said through the radio. "Notarized papers, bank account numbers, and fake signatures. Marky plans to show this to Sylvia Rostova tomorrow morning. It proves you didn't steal the bonds. You've been set up, Gus. You're the scapegoat." Gus stared at the papers, jaw tight. The betrayal hit him hard. He looked back at the road, breathing deeply. "You don't have an easy way out," Ken said softly, "but you can choose how this ends." A loud horn sounded far away. The red lights of a railroad crossing flashed, casting a deep red glow on Gus's face. "Command override 019er," Ken said through the radio. Suddenly, the van's engine died. The wheel locked. The van slowed down and stopped right on the train tracks. The radio went silent. The crossing bells rang loudly. Gus looked at the bright light of the coming freight train. Then he glanced down at the papers in his lap. Quickly, he stuffed the papers into his jacket, opened his door, and ran off into the bushes, leaving the engine stopped. Callie was locked inside the back. The train horn blew loud and sharp, shaking the metal walls of the van until Callie's teeth rattled. The big headlight beam shone through the wire mesh, blinding her. She screamed and pushed hard against the back doors, but the heavy locks wouldn't move. She had less than 10 seconds. Callie dropped to her knees and felt around the dark floor, searching for something. Her hand touched cold metal, heavy grooming scissors. She grabbed them and swung the sharp blades hard like a hammer at the small wire window in the partition. Crack! The safety glass cracked. The horn sounded louder now, a wall of noise pressing at her. She hit the glass again, putting in all her fear and anger. The glass broke. Callie pushed her arms through the hole, reached into the front cab, and unlocked the driver's door. She pushed through the broken glass, cutting her arms, then kicked the door open and jumped out onto the gravel. Right after, the train hit the back of the van. The big vehicle spun off the tracks and crashed into a concrete post with a loud crash. Callie lay on the ground, gasping, holding her arms where they bled. Marky wanted her gone. Gus had left her behind. Pendleton wanted her locked up. But Ken had set the trap. He planned this to scare her, or worse. She wiped the dirt from her face and forced herself to stand. She couldn't beat them with reason. She couldn't hide. She needed something to hold on to. She needed the bonds before Sylvia Rostova ruined the city. Callie walked 2 miles to a small bar at the edge of the industrial area. She sat in a booth near the back, drinking tap water, waiting. 10 minutes later, Garrison Gary Webb slid into the seat across from her. Gary, Marky's former business partner, looked worn out and held a cheap glass of whiskey. "You look terrible, Clarissa," Gary said quietly. "Marky is moving bearer bonds for Rostova's group," she said, her voice cold and calm. "He needs them to pay his debts. If we take them, we can save ourselves. You built his real estate business, Gary. Tell me where the vault is." Gary gave a dry laugh. "I have the original building plans. I know exactly where the vault is under his main building. But it won't help." "Why not?" she asked. "Because it needs 2 keys to open," Gary said, pulling a big brass key from his pocket and sliding it across the sticky table. "I took this one when he kicked me out." Callie stared at the key. "Where's the other one?" "Hudson kept it on his desk. But my inside guy says someone broke into his office 3 days ago and took it." Gary's eyes narrowed. "Your husband has the other key, Clarissa." Callie knew she couldn't call Ken. He had turned off his phone, deleted his email, and disappeared from the online world. He was working in the old-fashioned way. If she wanted to find him, she had to play by his rules. She went to a small store, bought the local paper, and flipped to the classifieds. Her eyes scanned the tiny print. Used furniture, plumbing, houses for sale. Then she saw it. For sale, 72. Charger SE parts. Mint condition. Needs a new driver. Will trade for peace of mind. Callie felt a sharp pain deep in her chest. The 72 Charger. It was the same car she had made fun of during their fight on the porch. The night she had said sleeping with Marky was okay. It was a clear message. Ken was trying to get a reaction from her. She found a payphone down the street, dropped some quarters in, and called the newspaper's ad office. She gave them her message and paid extra to get it in the evening paper fast. Wanted. 72. Charger SE parts. Willing to negotiate. Meet in the bright lights. She picked a time to meet. 3 hours later, Callie sat on a hard wooden bench in the huge, empty lobby of the IRS building in downtown Washington, D.C. The bright lights buzzed above her head. Security guards stood by metal detectors at the doors. It was like a fortress, the only place she knew where Marky's people could not bring weapons. Ken had chosen his place carefully. She watched the revolving doors, her heart beating hard. She waited for Ken's face to appear among the workers leaving for the day. But instead, a man in a wrinkled gray suit sat down suddenly beside her. Callie jumped a little. Arthur Pendleton didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead at the security gates. Slowly, he raised his hand. Between his fingers was the evening paper opened to the classifieds. Her ad was circled in bright red. "You think you're very clever, Mrs. Markwell," Pendleton's dry, rough voice said. "But federal buildings have a lot of cameras, and I have a lot of patience. I can have you arrested right now," he continued, still not looking at her. "Obstruction, tax evasion, conspiracy, take your pick." Callie held tight to the edge of the bench, her fingers going white. "You don't want me. You want Marky and his group. I know where the bonds are going." Pendleton finally looked at her, his eyes cold but moving. "I'm listening. Marky is making a handoff. I can get you the location." Callie lied carefully, trying to buy time with her work instincts. "But I want full immunity, in writing." "Immunity means you have to help," Pendleton said. He reached in his jacket and pulled out a small black disc with a tiny microphone. "You wear this. You become a hidden recorder. You catch Marky and Rostova talking about the bonds. Do that and I'll fix your tax problems." Callie looked at the device. It was a dangerous plan. If Sylvia found it, it could be very bad for her. "Do we have a deal?" Pendleton asked. Before Callie could speak, a man in a neat gray coat walked quickly past them. He blended in with the other workers leaving. He didn't stop or look back, but as he passed, Ken dropped a folded Wall Street Journal onto the empty space next to Callie on the bench. Callie's breath caught. Ken was like a ghost, moving right inside the IRS, controlling the game while others played simple moves. Pendleton didn't notice as the paper dropped, still waiting for her answer. "Fine," Callie whispered, sliding her hand over the newspaper to hide it. "I'll wear the wire." Pendleton stood up, pleased. "I'll be in touch." He walked toward the security desk without looking back. Callie waited until he left. Then she opened the newspaper. Taped to the finance page was a heavy brass key, just like Gary Webb's. Below it was a short, strange note written in black marker. "They don't know about the ink." Callie walked into Hudson Markey's office like she owned the building. She ignored the scared receptionist and pushed open the big wooden doors. She stood in front of his large desk. Markey looked up, tired, angry, and alone. Gus was not there. "You have a lot of nerve coming here," Markey growled, standing up. "Sit down, Hudson," Callie said firmly, putting her hands heavily on the desk. She used all the cold confidence she could, hiding her fear. "I have the vans. I have the whole fleet. I moved them while Gus was distracted." Markey stopped, his eyes moving quickly over her face, looking for a lie. "Where are they?" "Safe," Callie said, not telling the truth. "I'll give you the location and you can deliver the bonds to Sylvia Rostova tonight, but the price just went up." "I already paid you $850,000, Markey shouted, his face turning dark red. "That was just a deposit," Callie replied, using the same words Gus had said earlier. "I want half ownership in your real estate business. I want it in writing, signed, and official right now, or I'll destroy the fleet." Markey looked at her, breathing hard. He was caught. The midnight deadline with Sylvia was getting closer and closer. He pulled a stack of papers from his drawer. They were blank ownership transfer forms. Angry, he signed his name quickly at the bottom. He pushed the papers across the desk. "You're greedy, Clarissa." Callie looked down at the papers. Then her eyes moved to a framed contract on the corner of the desk. The original company agreement Markey had made Ken sign months ago at a charity event. That paper was supposed to give Markey power over her company. She stared at it. The signature lines were empty. They don't know about the ink, she thought. Ken had warned her about this. The electronic transfer forms had been printed with special ink that slowly disappears over time. It was a trick used by the government. The ink was gone after 4 weeks. Markey's claim to her company was not real. He had nothing. Now, out of fear, he was giving away his property. Before Callie could say anything, the private phone on Markey's desk rang loudly and suddenly. Markey grabbed it. "What?" He listened for 3 seconds. His face went pale. He let go of the phone, and it swung slowly off the desk. A quiet tone buzzed in the room. "That was Sylvia," Markey said softly, his voice shaking as he looked at Callie. "She isn't waiting for the vans. She just took my private jet." The quiet buzz from the phone filled the room. Markey sat frozen, his face white. Before Callie could understand what had happened, the heavy doors of the office swung open. Sylvia Rostova walked in. She wore a neat gray coat and moved with quiet, confident control. Behind her, 2 tall men in dark suits came inside. Their hands were near their hips, and they moved without making a sound. They closed the doors behind them. Markey fell back, hitting the edge of his chair. "Sylvia, the jet—" "The jet was just a warning, Hudson," Sylvia said calmly, her voice soft but firm, with a faint sound that was hard to place. "It was to make sure you knew how serious I am. I don't like waiting. I want proof." Markey swallowed hard, making a noise in the silence. "The bonds are safe. The fleet has had some problems, but we only need a few more hours." "You don't have hours," Sylvia replied, stopping a few feet from his desk. "You owe my group $20 million in untraceable paper. I will not leave this city without it." Callie watched Markey's shaking hands. The rich man looked broken, afraid like a small piece in a bigger game. If Callie stayed quiet, Sylvia would have her hurt just for being there. Callie knew she had to take charge. She stepped forward, standing tall, using all the strength she had as a leader. "I handle the transport," Callie said, keeping her voice calm. Sylvia slowly turned her gaze to Callie, her expression cold and empty. "And you are?" Sylvia asked. "Clarissa Markwell," Callie replied, pointing to some plain contracts on the desk. "I own the fleet. Hudson just connects people. I have the vans and control the special compartments. I can skip the federal way stations and get the bonds to any spot you say by midnight." Sylvia stared at her for what felt like a long time. Then, a faint, dry smile appeared on her lips. "A businesswoman! How unusual!" Sylvia gave a small nod. Suddenly, her bodyguard on the right moved quickly. He grabbed Callie's left arm tightly and slammed her wrist onto the shiny desk. Before she could pull away, he snapped a hard metal band around her wrist. A sharp click echoed in the room. Callie gasped as 3 tiny needles pressed against her skin. "What is this?" Callie asked, panicked, trying to pull back. The band was heavy and locked tightly. A small red clock glowed on the metal. "A biometric cuff," Sylvia said calmly, fixing her coat. "It checks your pulse. Inside is a strong, dangerous substance. If you don't bring me my bonds by midnight, it will release it into your blood. You will suffer badly in under 2 minutes." Callie looked at the red numbers. 11:59:59. The clock ticked down to 11:59:58. "Midnight, Clarissa," Sylvia said softly. "Don't be late." Sylvia turned and left the office, her guards close behind. Callie stood shaking, holding her wrist. She looked at Markey, who had sunk into his chair, breathing fast. He was no help. If she wanted to make it through the night, she had to get the bonds herself. She ran from the office, her mind moving fast. She had Ken's key. She had Garrison Webb. She knew exactly where to go. Garrison Webb waited in the damp alley behind Markey's main office building. He looked nervously at the car lights passing by, holding a rolled-up tube of old building plans close to him. "Got the second key?" Gary whispered as Callie stepped out of the shadows. Callie held up the heavy brass key Ken had dropped on a newspaper in the IRS lobby. Then she raised her left arm, pulling her sleeve back to show the blinking red numbers on the metal cuff. 10:42:15. "I have the key, and I have a deadline," Callie said, voice shaking. "Get me into that vault, Gary. Now." Gary paled when he saw the metal cuff, but nodded. He led her to a hidden heavy steel service door. Punching a 6-digit code into the old keypad, they slipped inside the dark, cold basement of the building. According to the plans, the vault wasn't on any corporate floor. It was deep underground, a secret part of the building Markey had added when it was first built. They moved through narrow utility halls. The quiet of the city above faded, turning into a heavy silence. Finally, they reached a dead end. There stood a huge steel vault door. It had no keypad, no scanner, and no wires. It was all very simple and old-fashioned. A locked door made of steel with 2 big brass keyholes set 3 feet apart. "2 keys," Gary whispered, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Both keys have to turn at the same time or the lock will block forever." Callie stepped forward and slid her brass key into the left hole. Gary put his key in the right one. "On 3, Callie said, her heart pounding fast. 1, 2, 3. They turned the keys together. A deep click sounded from inside the door, followed by a heavy noise as the lock moved. The door was unlocked. Callie grabbed the big steel handle and pulled back with all her strength. The door opened slowly and quietly. Lights inside the vault flicked on. Callie stepped inside, her breath catching. She expected to see millions of dollars waiting. But the room was empty. No boxes, no stacks of paper, no cases. The floor was clean and bare. "No!" Gary gasped, leaning against the doorframe. His face went pale. "This can't be. He moved the money down here last month." Callie walked slowly to the middle of the empty room. On the cold floor sat one strange thing, a wire-bristled dog brush. Under it was a folded piece of high-quality paper. Callie picked up the paper, her hands shaking. It was a government form, an official notice from the Internal Revenue Service about an audit. It was addressed to Hudson Markey. Callie's face went completely white. Ken hadn't just planned the transfer of the $850,000 as a trick. He had already taken everything from Markey's vault weeks ago. The whole scene on the porch, the difficult talks. It was all a trick. Ken had already won before anything really started. Suddenly, a loud hiss broke the silence. Callie spun around. The heavy steel door was closing by itself. "Gary, stop it!" she shouted. Gary jumped toward the door but slipped on the floor. The steel door slammed shut with a loud bang. The lock clicked, sealing them inside. For a long, tense moment, everything was dark. Then, the emergency lights flickered on with a soft orange glow. Callie ran to the door and slammed her hands on the cold metal. "Open!" she screamed, pulling at the handle, but it was locked tight. "The lock won't budge," Gary said softly. He slid down the wall onto the floor, his breathing fast and shallow. "We're stuck. It's like a sealed box." Callie looked at her wrist. Her red light on the security cuff glowed faintly. 09:14:33. Panic rose up inside her, but she forced herself to breathe and think. She thought of Ken. He was icy and smart, but not someone who hurt people with violence. He didn't use guns or cause injuries. Instead, he used rules, plans, and mind games. He wanted to scare her, not hurt her. "The blueprints," Callie said, dropping to her knees beside Gary. "Show me the blueprints." Gary didn't answer. He was struggling to breathe, his face turning a deep, worried color. He clawed at his shirt and his eyes rolled back. "Gary!" Callie shook him gently. He fell sideways, suddenly stopped by a heart attack. The big paper blueprints fell all over the dusty floor. Callie was completely alone. She quickly picked up the blueprints, smoothing them out under the warm yellow light. Her eyes followed the lines of the building's underground basement. There it was, a small 6x6 air vent right above the vault's ceiling. It sent air down through a strong steel grate. Callie pulled Gary's heavy canvas bag from the corner. She climbed onto a small aluminum step stool left by the workers. She reached up to the grate in the ceiling. The screws were stripped and very tight. She took a hairpin from her messy bun and broke off a loose piece from one of Gary's plastic toolboxes. Using the flat piece to push and the pin to hold, she worked on the screws. Her fingers hurt and slipped again and again on the smooth metal. Finally, the grate fell with a heavy sound onto the concrete floor. Callie pulled herself up into the dark, narrow air vent. The air was thick with old, dried dust. She shone her phone's light ahead. 3 feet down the tunnel, a thick steel plate blocked the way. She crawled toward it. Her hand brushed the floor and felt something tight and rough. A thin wire. Callie followed the wire up to a latch holding the steel plate in place. Ken had set a simple trap, not to hurt her, but as a secret way out. He had left a backdoor plan, knowing that if she stayed calm and thought like him, she would live. Callie pulled the wire. The latch opened with a snap. The steel plate fell flat. She moved quickly through the dark, tight tunnel, pulling herself forward until she reached the outside vent. She kicked it open and fell out into the cold night air of the alley. She coughed hard, breathing in fresh air. She wiped her eyes that were full of dust and looked up toward the dark alley. Arthur Pendleton stood over her, his hands deep in the pockets of his wrinkled gray suit. "You are a hard woman to find, Mrs. Markwell," Pendleton said without any surprise in his voice. Callie got up quickly, coughing and brushing dirt from her clothes. "The vault is empty," she said, pointing back to the vent. "Ken took the bonds. He took everything." Pendleton didn't even blink. "I know. The IRS has been taking Hudson Markey's property all week. Houses, shell companies, money, and foreign banks. Every day for a month, we got clear anonymous proof by mail." Callie stared at him, the truth hitting her hard. Ken had been breaking down Markey's entire business piece by piece while they lived under the same roof. She had missed it all, too caught up in herself. She lifted her left arm. The wristband blinked strongly. 2:11:45. "I have 2 hours left," Callie said, her voice shaking. "Sylvia Rostova will find me." Pendleton looked at the heavy device locked around her wrist. "I know a special medic, someone who works in secret. He has the tools to remove that without setting off the alarms." Hope rose inside Callie. "Where is he? Call him now." Pendleton reached inside his jacket and took out a small black disc with a tiny microphone and wire. "I'll call him. But first you must go to your meeting with Sylvia. You sit in front of her and get her to admit on tape that she is part of the bearer bond smuggling. Do that, and I will help save you." Callie looked at the small microphone, ready to take the risk. "Are you crazy? If she sees that, she'll be angry before the police arrive." "Then don't let her see it," Pendleton said without feeling. "Where is your backup?" Callie asked, looking around the empty alley in panic. "Where is the FBI? Where are the arrest teams?" Pendleton stepped closer. The faraway streetlights showed the empty, cold look in his tired eyes. "There is no backup, Clarissa. I am doing this job alone. My bosses think Markey is useless. If I bring them Sylvia Rostova easily, I get a big promotion. If you die at that diner tonight, I will destroy this wire and say you never existed." He grabbed her hand and pushed the wire hard into her palm. "You are the bait," Pendleton said quietly. "Now go." The neon sign of the 24-hour diner buzzed loudly in the wet night air. Inside, the bright lights were harsh and cold. The late-night guests were 2 tired truck drivers and a cook cleaning a greasy stove in the back. Callie sat in a red vinyl booth near the back door. Under her blouse, the small wire was taped flat against her chest. On her wrist, hidden by her jacket sleeve, the timer showed 0:24:10. The bell above the glass door rang. Sylvia Rostova came in alone. She did not look like a woman in charge of a big crime group. She looked like a rich, bored woman stopping for bad coffee. She slid smoothly into the booth across from Callie and put her neat hands on the sticky plastic table. "The midnight hour is close, Clarissa," Sylvia said quietly. "Do you have my bonds?" "The bonds are safe," Callie lied, making her voice loud so the hidden microphone could hear. "But I need promises. If I give you the bonds, I need to know your group will leave me alone. Hudson Markey used my ships for your smuggling without asking me." Sylvia tilted her head. Her cold eyes watched a sweat drop fall down Callie's temple. She saw Callie's fingers shake a little. Sylvia was very smart. She could smell fear and see danger from far away. Sylvia reached calmly into her pocket, pulled out a small black device, and clicked it. She slid it to the middle of the table. Under Callie's shirt, the wire gave off a soft, high sound, and then went silent. "An ultrasonic sound blocker," Sylvia said kindly. "Your friend from the IRS outside is hearing only noise now." Callie's heart sank. Pendleton could not hear them. She had no help, no power, and 23 minutes to survive. Sylvia leaned over the table. "You do not have my money, Markey does not have my money, but your husband does. Tell me where Ken is, Clarissa, and I will stop the timer. You can leave." Callie tried to speak, but a loud noise cut her off. A young waitress with tired eyes hurried past their booth. Her foot caught on the uneven floor. She stumbled, and the tray of hot black coffee she carried tipped over Sylvia's shoulder. The hot drink spilled across Sylvia's perfect black suit. Sylvia gasped, jumping up, her calm breaking as she wiped at the hot spots on her clothes. "I'm so sorry," the waitress said, very worried, grabbing napkins and quickly wiping the table. As the waitress's hand passed near Callie, she quietly slipped a folded napkin into Callie's lap. Callie looked down. Written in blue pen on the napkin was one sentence. "Check the sugar packet." Callie quickly reached for the small ceramic bowl in the middle of the table. She took out a pink artificial sweetener packet. It felt a little heavy in her hand. She tore the top open. Instead of powder, a small, tightly rolled strip of paper fell into her palm. She carefully unrolled it under the edge of the table. The message read, 849980. Location, 400 Ironbound Railyard. Ken was somewhere in the diner, controlling everything without ever showing his face. While Sylvia was busy trying to clean her damaged suit with ice water, Callie pressed the 6 numbers into a small keypad on her wrist. The heavy biometric cuff made a clicking sound, then hissed as it opened. Callie slid the heavy device off her wrist, kicked it under the table, and quietly walked out the back emergency door into the dark alley. The empty ironbound rail yard was covered in a thick, wet fog coming off the nearby river. Rusted old freight cars stood around like broken ribs of giant old creatures. Callie carefully stepped on the rough, uneven gravel, guided only by the soft glow of the city behind her. Ken's note had brought her here. She didn't know why he wanted her to come, but she had nowhere else to go. She turned a corner around a crumbling brick switching station and stopped. On a large cracked concrete slab, 4 white vans sat in a perfect circle, the missing dog grooming vans. Callie stepped out of the shadows, her breath showing in the cold air. The vans were dark and silent, their engines cold. Suddenly, the sound of tires screeching broke the quiet of the rail yard. A black car crashed through the old chain-link fence and sped across the gravel. It stopped near the vans. Hudson Markey jumped out looking wild and out of control. His suit jacket was gone, his shirt was torn, and he was holding a large rifle. It seemed that someone named Gus must have called him before disappearing, giving Markey the last clue Ken had left in the case. "The bonds!" Markey shouted into the fog, his eyes full of panic as he looked at the vans. "They're here!" He rushed to the closest van and opened the back doors. He didn't try to open the locked steel vault inside. Instead, he raised his rifle and fired loudly at the lock. The steel broke, sparks flying in the dark. Markey dropped the gun, grabbed a heavy crowbar from the floor, and pushed it into the broken lock. He pushed hard and screamed with effort, prying the heavy door open. "Yes!" Markey cried, reaching into the dark vault with bare hands to grab the bricks inside. He pulled out a large, tightly wrapped block covered in thick plastic. The fog shifted, and Callie watched from the shadows as Markey looked at the block in his trembling hands. But it wasn't real money. It was shredded newspaper, wrapped tightly to look just like the bonds. Ken had filled the vault with trash. It was the final harsh trick on Markey's entire operation. Markey dropped the fake brick and fell to his knees on the wet gravel, letting out a deep, painful cry. His network, his money, his power, it was all gone. Taken down without any damage to computers or machines, just by simple trickery. Suddenly, bright white lights switched on, shining through the fog and pushing it away. Huge floodlights lit up the whole rail yard from all 4 corners. 3 armored SUVs quietly moved out of the dark, surrounding Markey and the vans with a strong wall of metal. Sylvia Rostova had arrived. The heavy armored doors of the Escalades swung open. More than a dozen well-armed men stepped out into the bright floodlights. They pointed their weapons and laser sights straight at Hudson Markey. Sylvia stepped out of the middle vehicle. She had taken off her torn jacket and now wore a neat black tactical shirt. The calm, polite woman from the diner was gone. This was a powerful figure in the secret world of high finance, and she had been tricked. "Hudson," Sylvia said, her voice sharp and cold in the damp night air. "I have no more patience. Give me the bonds." Markey stumbled backward on the rough gravel, his hands raised and empty. He had left his rifle by the van. "Sylvia, please! They aren't here! The vault was full of fake papers. He took the real ones. The accountant took them." He looked around nervously in the bright rail yard and saw Callie hiding near the front tire of the 4th van. "Her!" Markey shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Callie. "It was her husband! She planned this! Stop her!" Sylvia's men turned their rifles toward the van. Callie pressed her back against the cold tire, her heart pounding wildly. As she crouched in the dirt, her fingers touched something hard taped inside the wheel well. She looked down. It was a small battery-powered radio. A thick copper wire led from the radio's speaker out, across the gravel, and up to an old, rusty pole holding the rail yard's loudspeakers. The radio buzzed with static. Then Ken's voice filled the air, loud and clear from the horn speakers high above. His voice echoed through the fog, sounding cold and unfeeling. "Hudson Markey," Ken's voice said in a booming tone. "You owe the Rostova Syndicate $20 million. The physical bonds you planned to use to pay that debt were boxed, stamped, and mailed to a federal office exactly 48 hours ago." Sylvia stopped, her eyes narrowing as she looked up at the speakers. "They were sent directly to Arthur Pendleton's desk at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division," Ken's message went on, without any emotion. "The syndicate's money is now locked in a federal evidence room. It cannot be touched." The rail yard fell silent, heavy and full of tension. Callie watched Sylvia's face from her shadowy spot. The truth hit the broker like a hard punch. The money wasn't hidden or lost. It was gone, taken for good by the government. Sylvia looked down at Markey, who was crying openly in the dirt, begging quietly for his safety. There was no chance left, no deal to make, no money to find. Sylvia Rostova said nothing. She turned her back to Markey and gave a slow, careful nod to her men. The armed men raised their weapons together. Callie covered her ears tightly, closed her eyes, and bent her head to her knees as loud shots echoed through the night. She did not stay to see what happened to Markey. As the noise filled the rail yard, she turned and ran blindly into the thick fog. She kept her hands over her ears, but the sound still rang in her head, bouncing off old freight cars. Then, after the noise stopped, a heavy silence took its place. Callie ran until the rough ground changed to damp pavement. Her lungs burned, and the rush of fear slowly turned into cold, shaky sickness. After some time, she found a cheap motel a couple of miles from the rail yard. They only took cash. The neon sign flickered and buzzed outside the window of room 114. Callie sat on the edge of the old mattress, still dirty from the dust and debris around her. Her hands shook as she looked at the blank TV screen. She had made it through. Sylvia's men were gone. Markey was dealt with. Pendleton had the bonds. Now all she needed was to stay quiet until the federal raid was over so she could use her immunity deal and start fresh. Callie reached for the sticky remote and turned on the TV to check the morning news. The local news reporter talked softly in the small room, but the story was not about the usual trouble at the old railroad yard. "Breaking news this morning about a big money scandal involving local real estate boss Hudson Markey." Callie leaned in, her eyebrows pulling together in concern. The screen changed to clear security footage. It was from 6 months ago, at the hospital gala. The video was clear, taken from high above the dance floor. It showed Callie and Markey standing near a corner table. They were talking close together. But it wasn't just video. A clear audio recording played too, caught by a special microphone. Callie's own voice came through the cheap speakers, loud and clear. "The dog grooming trucks cross state lines all the time," her voice said. "If I change the orders, you can move whatever papers you want. Ken won't notice. He just looks at numbers." Markey's proud laugh followed. "And the changes?" "I'll make him sign it," Callie said on the tape. "He signs anything I give him." Callie dropped the remote. It broke on the simple floor. Ken hadn't only taken pictures at the gala, he had recorded everything, and he hadn't given the tape to Pendleton for a quiet check. He had sent it to the news. Her face was on TV all over the 3 states. Her voice, full of sneaky plans, played again and again. She wasn't a victim caught up in Markey's lies. She was seen as part of the crime. Her reputation, her skills, her whole public image destroyed in one news story. Suddenly, the heavy wooden door of room 114 burst open with a loud noise. The frame cracked. Arthur Pendleton stood in the doorway, the morning light behind him. 2 federal agents wearing vests stood with him in the narrow hall. Pendleton stepped inside, holding a thick stack of papers. "Clarissa Markwell," he said, his voice cold and calm, "you're under arrest." The interrogation room at the IRS Criminal Investigation Division was the same as the one Callie had been in just one day before. But now the air felt much colder. She sat handcuffed to the metal table. Pendleton placed a large cardboard box on the table with a heavy thump. "Obstruction, tax evasion, federal conspiracy to hide unreported bearer bonds," Pendleton said, pulling papers from the box and spreading them out. "I had a deal," Callie said, her voice empty. "I wore the wire. I went to the diner." You wore a wire that only recorded 20 minutes of silence, Pendleton said flatly. You gave us no useful evidence, and you ran away during a federal raid. Your deal is off. Pendleton slid the first paper toward her. It was a lease for the old railroad yard. This was signed 3 weeks ago, Pendleton said. He tapped the bottom line with his fingernail. By you. Callie stared at the signature. It was not fake. It was her own handwriting, her weaknesses, her key points. Pendleton slid another paper forward. Invoices for the heavy steel vaults welded into the dog grooming vans. Signed by Clarissa Markwell. A third paper. The papers that created a company in the Cayman Islands. Signed by Clarissa Markwell. He forged them, Callie said softly, sweat running down her neck. Ken is an expert in forensics. He copied my signature from the vendor contracts. Maybe, Pendleton said, but he also used your personal protected laptop to send the electronic parts of these documents. He used your IP address. We took the keyboard from your home office today. The only fingerprints on it are yours. Callie felt the room closing in on her. Ken hadn't just ruined Marky. He had carefully, perfectly set her up to take the blame for the whole operation, leaving his name clear. There's one more thing, Pendleton said, leaning back. Hudson Markey made it out of the Railyard alive. Callie's head snapped up. What? Sylvia Rostova's men tried to hurt him, but federal agents got there before they could finish. Markey is now in federal custody. Pendleton placed his hands on the table. His lawyers called us an hour ago. They want a deal. Markey will say he was just an investor and that you ran the entire smuggling ring. Callie couldn't breathe. Her dream to be a CEO, her pride in thinking she could outsmart Ken and control Markey, had become her worst problem. You have two choices, Clarissa, Pendleton said, his voice low and official. You can take Markey's blame and spend the next 15 years in prison, or you can help me. Callie looked up, scared. Help you do what? Markey is very rich, Pendleton said. His money is hidden and protected by complex laws. I need someone from the inside. I need you to help me find the legal ways to take away all his clean assets. For 3 long days, Callie stayed in a small windowless room on the 4th floor of the IRS building, watched by federal agents. She was no longer a business owner. She was the key to the case. Under the threat of prison, she worked carefully to destroy the wealth she had fought so hard to get. She studied Markey's paper records, finding the holding companies and offshore accounts he had talked about during lunch months ago. She gave Pendleton the exact names of the fake companies Markey used to protect his real estate. But Markey's lawyers fought hard. They said Markey's clean real estate was separate from the accounts linked to the illegal money. They argued the government could not take clean assets for bad crimes. On the 4th night, tired and drinking old coffee, Callie found the problem. She was checking her own dog grooming business taxes from the last 3 years. She saw small, careful mistakes, deductions that were counted wrong, too much depreciation on the grooming vans. Wait, Callie said, pointing at a printed spreadsheet. Pendleton looked up. What? The $849,000 transfer from Markey? Callie said, her voice tight. Ken didn't just move it through our business account to cause the audit. He timed it just right with the end of our business quarter. Callie grabbed a ledger from the pile and pushed it to Pendleton. Ken left careful mistakes in our joint tax returns for the last 3 years, Callie said, understanding the terrible cleverness of the trap. When Markey's deposit arrived in our business account, Ken's program immediately used the money to pay off old corporate tax debts we had created on purpose. The money Markey sent was not clean, but Ken used it to settle our official tax bills, making the money look clean. Pendleton looked at the ledger with a slow, sharp smile. Commingling, he said softly. Exactly, Callie replied, feeling sick to her stomach. By paying our corporate debt with Markey's money, Ken legally joined our fake business with Markey's real estate business. There is no line between them now. It's all connected. Pendleton picked up his desk phone. Prepare the orders to freeze everything. Markey's properties, his cash, his accounts overseas, freeze it all? Callie sank back in her chair. She realized she had to help cause the very poverty she had always feared. You're free to go, Mrs. Markwell, Pendleton said without looking up. Your court date for the plea deal is tomorrow morning. Callie left the federal building into the warm night air. She had no money, no business, and no husband. She headed to the courthouse parking garage to get her car. The dark concrete space echoed with the sound of dripping water. As she pulled out her keys, a shadow moved from behind a concrete pillar near her car. A strong hand grabbed her neck and pushed her hard against the driver's side door. It was Hudson Markey. He looked like a broken man. His shirt was wrinkled and his coat was dirty. One arm was bandaged. His face was bruised and swollen. He smelled bad and desperate. "You did this," Markey said in a rough, broken voice. His grip on her neck tightened. "They froze everything. My accounts. My buildings. I used the last of my money just to get out of jail. Now I have nothing. Nothing!" Callie gasped, trying to free herself. "Hudson, please! I'm going to hurt you," Markey said, pressing harder against her throat. "Then I'm going to find your husband and make him pay." He didn't understand. Even now, with nothing left, Markey still believed threats and fear were the strongest tools. He couldn't see how Ken had beaten him without violence or force. "You won't have to search far." The voice was clear and calm in the garage. Markey froze and slowly loosened his grip on Callie's neck. He turned to see Ken stepping out from behind a car. Ken was not dressed like a soldier or carrying a weapon. Instead, he wore a neat gray suit and looked calm. In his right hand, Ken held a simple leather-bound ledger. Markey pushed Callie away and charged at Ken, fists clenched and filled with rage. But Ken did not move back. Calmly, he threw the ledger at Markey. The book hit Markey's chest hard. He caught it, breathing heavy. "What is this? Another one of your tricks?" Markey asked. "Open it," Ken said, hands in his pockets. Markey looked at Ken, breathing hard. Slowly, he opened the heavy leather cover. Callie sat on the ground nearby, rubbing her sore neck and trying to breathe again. The pages were filled with Ken's neat, careful handwriting. Markey's eyes quickly scanned the lines of ink. "This is—" Markey's voice broke. "These are my private bank numbers, the secret money transfers. How did you get these?" "You invited me into your office, Hudson," Ken said, his voice bouncing softly off the cold walls. "While you were busy pouring champagne and trying to buy my wife, I was watching the glass doors behind your desk. I read the account numbers from your unprotected screen. The rest was just checking the details by hand." Markey turned the page, his hands starting to shake. The book showed clear records of every time Markey had avoided paying taxes. It included bribes, fake companies, and illegal permits. But as Markey reached the last page, his breath caught. The angry, strong energy left his body, replaced by deep fear. "No," Markey whispered, stepping back from the book as if it were dangerous. "No, you couldn't know this." Callie leaned against her car. "What is it?" "It's proof," Ken said, still looking at Markey. "Hudson has worked with the Rostova Group before. 5 years ago, a deal in Miami went wrong. Hudson gave up and told federal agents to save himself. He let someone else take the blame." Ken paused, letting the quiet fill the damp air. "That person was Sylvia Rostova's younger brother. He died in prison 3 weeks later." Markey dropped the book. It hit the ground with a loud thud. Sylvia hadn't just come to Newark for the money. Markey thought this was only business. But Ken had found the dark history under the surface. "I sent a paper copy of that book to Sylvia Rostova's safe drop point 2 days ago," Ken said. Markey understood the awful truth. The tax agents were the least of his worries. He had crossed the syndicate family, and Ken simply gave them the proof. Markey was in danger in the criminal world. There was no place left for him to hide. The sound of police sirens began to echo through the city streets, growing louder fast. Markey looked at the red and blue lights reflecting off the walls, then at Ken. The billionaire turned and ran quickly into the dark stairway, a scared man with no money, no power, and trouble all around him. The sirens passed the garage and slowly faded away. Callie stood alone with Ken in the quiet, empty space. The person who had caused her pain stood just a few feet away, calm and steady. Callie took a shaky step forward. "Ken." He looked at her, his face unreadable. Callie felt tears start to fall, hot and full of need. "Ken, please. I know what I did can't be forgiven. I know I was blinded by greed. But we got through it. We beat him." She nodded toward the empty stairwell. "We still have the $850,000. We can use it. We can pay the fines. We can start again." She took another step, hoping their shared past could soften the coldness in his eyes. "I did this for us, Ken. I wanted the business to grow. I wanted the house. I wanted the 2 kids we talked about. I wanted a family with you." Ken watched her cry. He didn't smile or yell. He looked at her with a calm, distant expression, like a scientist watching a test. "You didn't do this for a family, Clarissa," Ken said quietly. "You did it because you were proud, and your ambition was bigger than your ability." That made you the easiest part to figure out in this whole plan, Ken said quietly. Callie wiped her face, breathing hard. That's not true. I wanted a family. I wanted your children. I can't have kids, Ken said. Callie stopped moving, shocked. His words hung in the air, clear and final. I've been unable to have children since I was born, Ken went on, his voice calm, without sadness or anger. I found out when I was 20. I never told you. So, when you talked about our future kids, to explain your long hours or your late nights with Hudson Markey, I knew you weren't telling the truth. You built your excuse on something impossible. Callie felt like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. The story she'd told herself to justify her actions was gone. She had no reason to feel right or blame others. She was exposed. Ken reached into his jacket and pulled out one folded paper. He stepped forward and handed it to her. Callie took it with shaking hands. It was a signed, official statement for the IRS investigators explaining her part in the tax fraud and clearing Ken of any blame. Pendleton's agents are waiting for you in the courthouse lobby, Ken said. He didn't say goodbye. He just turned and walked away into the dark parking garage, his steps slowly fading. The bright lights buzzed loud in the federal courtroom. Callie sat at the big oak defense table, her hands stiff in her lap. Next to her sat a tired public defender. Across from them, Arthur Pendleton sat at the prosecutor's table, sorting his papers carefully. She had signed the confession Ken gave her. She was done fighting. The defendant will stand, the judge said, looking over his glasses. Callie stood slowly, her legs weak. Clarissa Markwell, you have pled guilty to 1 count of federal tax evasion and 1 count of corporate fraud conspiracy, the judge read from a large stack of papers. Because you cooperated in breaking up the Markey real estate business, the prosecution will not ask for prison time. Callie took a shaky breath. She was not going to jail. But, the judge's voice grew firm, the money penalties are final. You must pay $3.2 million in restitution. Callie closed her eyes. It was a huge amount, but she was a businesswoman. She could rebuild. She could start again, use her contacts, and work her way out of debt. Also, the judge said, turning to the last page of the plea deal, under Clause 4B of the Department of Justice Agreement, you are permanently banned from being an officer, director, or manager of any company. You cannot use business credit, hold a business license, or make business contracts in the United States. Callie's eyes flew open in shock. She looked at her public defender, who only stared at his paper. She looked across at Pendleton, who gave her a small, cold smile. They were not just taking her money. They were taking away her drive and career. What she had worked for, her business power, was gone for good. The judge hit his gavel. Court is over. Callie sank into her chair, feeling empty. As the courtroom cleared, Pendleton stopped by her table. You should know, he said softly, adjusting his briefcase. The police found Hudson Markey an hour ago. Callie looked up, numb. Sylvia Rostova's people found him near the docks, Pendleton said. He's alive, but they hurt him badly. He's in a coma at the county hospital. Pendleton left the courtroom, leaving Callie all alone in the quiet wooden room. Arthur Pendleton stood in the hallway of an old apartment building near the edge of the city. He knocked twice on the heavy wooden door of apartment 4B. No answer. Pendleton nodded to the 2 federal agents behind him. One moved forward with a heavy iron ram, placing it against the deadbolt. Hit it, Pendleton said. The door broke open with a loud crash. The agents rushed inside, checking every corner with their weapons ready. Clear, one agent called out from the bedroom. Clear in the kitchen, the other added. Pendleton stepped over the broken door frame and put his weapon away. He looked around the living room. It was perfectly clean. The walls were empty. The furniture was wiped down carefully. There was no sign anyone lived there, except for one thing sitting in the middle of the kitchen island. It was a neat, heavy cardboard box. Pendleton walked to the box and opened the lid. Inside were thousands of papers. Original contracts, official bank records, photos, and surveillance notes. Everything needed to prove that Hudson Markey and Clarissa Markwell were guilty, and it could be used in court without question. On top of the stack was a small white envelope. Pendleton opened it and found a single government paper, a death certificate. He read the name, Kenneth Markwell, deceased. The date on the paper was from 3 weeks ago. Because of a secret clerical error deep in the Department of Justice records, Kenneth Markwell no longer existed on paper. The accountant had used his clearance to erase his identity. He could not be called to court or connected to any problems after the syndicate's fall. He was like a ghost. Pendleton left the apartment and went down to the street. He stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the security camera above the building's door. He took out his phone and watched the live feed. The camera showed a man in a dark suit leaving the building 20 minutes earlier. The man didn't look back. He moved smoothly into the busy sidewalk, turned a corner, and disappeared into the city. Never seen again. The wooden gavel hit the auction block with a sharp sound that echoed across the dusty county warehouse. Callie stood at the back of the room, arms tightly folded, watching her life being sold off. "Lot 402, the auctioneer said quickly into the microphone. 4 commercial grooming vans, heavy chassis, water systems removed. Starting bid, $50,000. Callie flinched. The vans she had built from nothing, the vans that had carried valuable shipments and survived accidents, were now under harsh lights, with their logos removed. The bids came fast and low. The county was selling everything to pay off part of Callie's $3 million tax debt. She watched as her office furniture, expensive grooming tools, and the large steel safes were sold for much less than their worth. "Sold to the buyer in the third row for $82,000, the auctioneer said, striking the gavel again. Callie looked toward the third row. A woman in a plain brown coat stood, holding a bidding paddle. She walked to the clerk's desk to sign the papers. As the woman turned, the bright warehouse light shone on her face. Callie's breath caught. It was the waitress from the diner, the quiet, tired woman who had spilled coffee on Sylvia Rostova on purpose and slipped Callie the code to the biometric cuff. Callie watched in shock as the waitress signed the last papers for a company nobody knew about. Ken hadn't just ruined the dog grooming business. He had secretly bought it back through hidden ways for much less than it was worth. He had planned the seizure by the IRS, cleared the company's debts, and kept the shop itself. He had won over the entire board. Callie stepped back out of the warehouse and pushed through the heavy double doors into the bright afternoon sun. She walked to the bus stop. Her car had been taken by the bank 2 days before. Sitting on a worn plastic bench covered with graffiti, she waited for the 42 bus. She pulled a crumpled envelope from her purse and opened it. Inside was her first official notice from the government about wage garnishment. 80% of her future pay would be taken forever to cover the debt. She stared at the dark numbers on the paper. She was broke. She was a convicted felon. And she was not allowed to run a business ever again. The morning news showed the fall of an empire. Callie sat at a small table in her tiny rented studio apartment, holding a mug of cheap instant coffee. The small TV hummed quietly in the corner. "In a large, planned operation late last night," the news anchor said with a serious voice, "a joint team from the FBI and the Department of Justice broke down the secret money network led by Sylvia Rostova." Footage showed agents taking a group of people out of a guarded place in Miami. Sylvia Rostova was led away in handcuffs, her usual cold calm gone. The unusual raid, the anchor added, was based on a surprising set of paper records and ledgers mailed to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. Ken had done it. He used Markey's greed to reveal the group, then used the group's strength to stop Markey. He had turned old-fashioned paper records against the digital world. The news moved to another story. "In a strange turn in this federal case," the anchor said, "the Justice Department said this morning that nearly $850,000 was quietly returned to the government fund." Callie lowered her mug, hands shaking. Ken had not kept the dirty money. He didn't want Markey's cash. He hadn't ruined her life for money. It was just a tool, a number in his plan. When the plan was finished, he gave the money back. The huge and scary strength of his honesty crushed her. She had given up her marriage for money, thinking Ken was small and not ambitious. But Ken was a giant of strict fairness, and she hadn't matched him. The TV went into a loud commercial break. Callie stood up from the table. She walked to a small closet, took out a cheap polyester jacket, and put it over her faded shirt. She had to go to work. She couldn't run a business, couldn't borrow money, and couldn't use her degree. Her criminal record made it impossible to get a good job in the corporate world she had once hoped to join. She picked up her simple canvas bag, opened the door of her small apartment, and stepped out into the hallway. The heavy metal lock clicked shut behind her. The bright lights of the Megacorp insurance building buzzed softly. Callie sat on a hard plastic chair in the windowless waiting room, holding her canvas bag tightly. In the past 3 weeks, she had applied for 62 jobs, positions like junior manager, logistics helper, and sales worker. Her resume looked perfect. Her degree was real. But her criminal record made things hard. When background checks showed her past mistakes, the interviews stopped quickly. She was not allowed to have a company credit card or handle money. She felt alone and rejected. The heavy wooden door to the Human Resources office opened with a click. "Clarissa?" a sharp voice called out. Callie stood up and smoothed out her wrinkled polyester jacket. She walked into a small office that smelled like old coffee and cleaning chemicals. Behind a gray metal desk sat Brenda. Brenda was in her late 40s, wearing a strict floral blouse and a permanent frown. She did not stand up or offer a hand. "Sit down," Brenda said, pointing to a folding chair. She looked at Callie's application, tapping a red pen on the desk. "You want the basement data entry clerk job?" "Yes," Callie said, trying to smile kindly. "I'm very organized, and I have a lot of experience with managing databases and data." "I don't care about your experience," Brenda said coldly. She circled the part of the form where Callie had marked yes for a felony. "We get a tax credit for hiring people with records for work that doesn't involve money. You'll be typing claim numbers into a spreadsheet for 9 hours every day. No internet, no phones, 2 short breaks, and half an hour for lunch." Callie felt a knot in her throat. She used to run a company and plan trips to Belize. "That's fine," she said quietly. "I run things strictly here, Clarissa," Brenda warned, leaning forward. "I don't care who you were before. If you're late, I take money from your pay. If you make more than 2% errors, you're out. If you're rude, you're out. Understand?" Callie looked at Brenda. The bossy, harsh tone and the total control over workers. This was the same attitude Callie had once shown to new workers when she was in charge. It was the hard truth of the job she had tried so hard to get. She looked down and said, "Yes, ma'am." "Good. You start tomorrow at 6 in the morning," Brenda said, throwing the application into a tray. "You're done here." Callie left the building and took 3 buses to get back to her apartment. She unlocked the deadbolt and stepped inside the small, stuffy room. She dropped her bag on the little table and turned to the small kitchen area. At the door, perfectly placed on the welcome mat, was a thick manila envelope. There was no return address. The name on it was written in Ken's neat and precise handwriting. Callie stared at the envelope, her heart beating fast. She picked it up. It felt heavy and official. She sat on the edge of her unmade bed, her hands shaking as she opened the thick paper flap. Inside was a stack of legal papers. The top one had the official county court seal. It was the final divorce papers, signed by the judge. Because she had a criminal record, and because Ken's identity had been officially erased by the government, the state quickly ended their marriage without him being there. It was finished. There was no property to split, no money to fight over, no talks to drag through. Ken had cut all legal ties clearly, leaving her with all the debt. Callie turned to the second page, feeling a heavy sadness squeeze her chest. She hoped to find a note, a letter, something showing anger, sadness, or regret. Something to prove their years together meant more than just a failed deal. But instead, a single picture slipped out from between the papers and floated to the floor. Callie bent to pick it up. It was a photo of the porch at Hudson Markey's business office, the same spot where they had stood the night he proposed to her. The picture was not glossy like a real photo. It was just printed on cheap printer paper. She turned it over. On the back, written neatly in Ken's black ink, were 3 words. The transaction cleared. Callie stared at the poor quality paper, feeling the air leave her lungs. She let out a quiet, broken cry. He didn't hate her. He didn't love her. He had just turned their whole marriage, her betrayal, and the ruin of her life into a simple business deal that was now closed. He had taken away any sad meaning she had wanted to find. She was not a lost wife or a tragic figure. She was just a bad risk that had been ended. Her phone on the bedside table vibrated hard. Callie wiped her face and picked it up. The number was blocked. "Hello?" she whispered. "Clarissa Markwell?" a cold official voice asked. "This is the federal medical prison at Devon's." Callie held the phone tight. "Yes? We are calling about inmate Hudson Markey. He has just woken up from his medically induced coma." The bright white lights in the federal medical ward buzzed with a cold, harsh sound. The air smelled of bleach and something old and unpleasant. Callie stood by the thick glass window of the intensive care room, looking inside. Hudson Markey lay tied down to a hospital bed. The proud billionaire who had once promised her the world for one night was gone. His face was thin and bruised, with yellowed skin. Heavy metal braces were attached to his skull to keep his broken neck steady. Sylvia Rostova's group hadn't just hurt him. They had taken away everything he was. He could no longer move his legs. A tired nurse in plain scrubs came into the room. She did not look at Marky's face. She simply fixed his IV, took a spoon of pureed food from a plastic tray, and fed him slowly. Marky swallowed the soft food, staring blankly at the ceiling. He had lost all pride, all control, all the charm that had once filled the room. Now, he was just a prisoner of the state. "Mrs. Markwell?" Callie turned. A young man wearing a cheap suit and holding an old briefcase walked toward her in the hall. "I'm David Vance," he said, adjusting his glasses. "I am Mr. Marky's court-appointed lawyer." Callie noticed his suit. "Where are his company lawyers? Where is his legal team?" Vance gave a dry laugh. "They left the moment the IRS seized all his bank accounts. His real money was mixed with the illegal stuff. He has nothing left." He opened his briefcase. "Actually, I was just about to tell him that my fees as his lawyer will be taken from the small amount he has in his prison account." Callie looked back through the glass at Marky. He was facing many years in this cold, bright prison hospital. He would die there in that hospital bed, fed by strangers with no power to help himself. "Can I go in?" Callie asked, her voice shaking. "I just need to talk to him." She longed for a human connection. She wanted to look into his eyes and share the deep sadness that Ken had trapped them both in. Marky was the only person in the world who really understood what she had lost. Vance shook his head and closed his briefcase. "I'm sorry, but no." "Why not?" "I have permission." "Because he put you on his restricted list," Vance said plainly. Callie blinked, confused. "He blocked me?" "He hates you, Clarissa," Vance said without kindness. "He blames you for everything that went wrong. He told the guards that if you ever come into his room, he won't face you." Vance turned and walked down the cold hallway. Callie stayed still by the glass. She was truly, completely alone. She walked out of the federal prison into cold, heavy rain. She pulled her thin blazer tighter around her, shivering as the wet soaked through her blouse. She rushed across the cracked parking lot, keeping her head low against the wind. At last, she reached her car, a rusty old sedan she had bought with the last money she had saved. She pushed the metal key into the lock, yanked the door open, and sank into the damp seat. She turned the key. The engine clicked and coughed, then stopped. "No," Callie whispered, her chest tightening with fear. "Please, no." She tried again. A heavy grinding noise came from the engine, then silence. She hit the steering wheel hard. Again and again she struck it, crying out in frustration until her voice broke and tears blurred her eyes. She had no money for help, no credit card to call for a tow, no one to call for help. The harsh truth of her loneliness hit her hard. She was stuck in the rain outside a prison, with no friends, no money, no hope. Callie opened the door and stepped into the cold rain. She pulled the collar of her blazer over her head and began the long walk to the main road to find a bus stop. As she walked along the side of the road, a large truck sped by. It hit a big puddle, splashing dirty, oily water up over the curb and soaking Callie's legs from her waist down. The work pants she needed for her job tomorrow were ruined. She stopped and looked down at the mud. She did not shout or cry. She just stood there in the rain, letting the cold truth of her new life settle deep inside her. 6 months later. The sound of fingers typing on keyboards filled the windowless basement of the Megacorp insurance building. The air was thick and smelled like old paper and machines. Callie sat in cubicle 414, staring at the bright spreadsheet on her screen. Her eyes stung from the sharp blue light. Claim number 8849B, status denied, amount owed 0. She pressed enter. The box turned gray. Then she went to the next task. It was endless, dull work. She had been typing numbers for 9 hours every day, 5 days a week. Now it was time for her lunch break. Callie opened the bottom drawer of her old desk and took out a plastic bag with a squished peanut butter sandwich. It was all she could afford. She pulled her pay stub from an envelope. Gross pay, $480. Below it, in big red letters, federal restitution garnishment, 80%. Net take-home pay, 96 mores. She pushed the pay stub back into the drawer, her stomach twisting with worry. "I'm telling you, it's a gold mine," a voice said from the aisle between the cubicles. Callie looked up. 2 younger workers, both in their early 20s, were leaning against the cubicle wall, whispering over cheap coffee. "My friend knows a guy who runs an offshore money pool," the taller one said, eyes shining with excitement. "You just send the company money through a Cayman Islands shell company, take the first hit, then get out before the authorities notice. You can double your money in a year. I'm going to ask him to be my partner." Callie froze. The dry bread in her mouth felt like dust. Their boldness shocked her. They really thought they could beat the system. That was exactly what she had sounded like earlier. She got up and stepped out of her cubicle. "Don't do it." The two stopped talking and looked at her with a bit of irritation. "Excuse me?" the taller one said. "Don't do it," Callie said again more urgently. "You think you can control everything. You think you're smarter than the records. You're not. They will find out. They will stop you, and it will take everything away from you." The younger worker looked her up and down, her old, dirty pants, worn shoes, tired face. He shared a mocking glance with his friend. "Sure, Clarissa," the clerk laughed, shaking his head. "Thanks for the expert advice. I'll remember that when I'm still stuck typing sheets in the basement at 40. They turned their backs and walked away, whispering and laughing on their way to the break room. Callie stood there feeling helpless. She had to watch others make the same mistakes, led by the same pride, and she could do nothing. She was like a shadow of hope, marked by her own ruin. She went back to her cubicle, sat on the hard plastic chair, and looked up at the small, dirty basement window near the ceiling. All she could see were dirty shoes of free people walking on the street above. The cold wind blew sharply off the river as Callie walked home from the bus stop. The city was dark, lit only by the warm orange lights of fancy restaurants and tall office buildings in the business area. Callie kept her head down and her hands deep in her pockets, focusing only on putting one foot in front of the other. As she passed a giant glass window of an exclusive steakhouse, a quick movement caught her eye. Callie stopped on the cold sidewalk. Sitting at a table near the glass, under the soft glow of a chandelier, was Ken. He wasn't hiding or wearing anything to cover himself. He looked healthy. His face was calm, the stress from their failing marriage gone. He wore a dark, perfect suit and was sharing a quiet dinner with an older man who looked important. Ken lifted a glass of red wine and smiled warmly at something the other man said. Callie stepped closer to the cold glass, her breath fogging it up. She pressed her hand against the window. For a brief, painful moment, she wanted to knock on the glass. She wanted him to see her pain, to know how much his choices had hurt her. Inside the restaurant, Ken shifted in his chair. He glanced out the large window at the cold night. His eyes passed over Callie. They stayed for just a moment on her pale, worried face. But he did not recognize her at all. He did not show any reaction. He looked at her like she was just part of the background, like a streetlight or a piece of trash blowing by. Then he turned back to his co-worker, calm and unfazed, and took a sip of his wine. Callie stood outside in the cold wind, the harsh truth crushing her last bit of pride. He hadn't just moved on, he had completely removed her from his mind. She meant nothing to him. Pulling her collar up against the cold, she turned away from the warm light inside and walked alone into the night. Ken finished his wine, set his glass down on the white tablecloth, and wished his co-worker a good night. He left the restaurant and stepped into the cool air, his breath showing in faint clouds. He called a taxi, giving the driver an address in a quiet, well-kept neighborhood about 20 miles from the city center. He didn't live in a big mansion, nor did he have a fancy car. The taxi stopped in front of a neat mid-century house surrounded by tall oak trees. The place was peaceful and tidy. Ken opened the front door and went inside. The house smelled like polished wood and clean sheets. He worked now as a private consultant, taking only cases that interested him. He owed nothing to any company or partner, and his mind was clear. He went to his study, took off his jacket, and placed it neatly over a leather chair. At his heavy wooden desk was a small locked box. Ken turned the dial, opened the lock, and lifted the lid. Inside was a single folded piece of paper, the original check for $849,980. Used once in an important transaction. It was no longer valuable as it had been taken by legal action. Ken picked up the paper and carried it to the living room, where a low fire burned in the hearth. He didn't look at the check with anger or pride, only as something finished and done. He tossed the paper into the flames and stood still, hands in his pockets, watching it burn, curl, and turn to ash. The smoke rose up the chimney. He let go of his anger. He let go of the past hurt. He was free. Ken turned from the fire, picked up a thick book from the coffee table, and sat in his chair. The quiet of the house felt like a calm hug instead of an empty space. In the early morning, soft sunlight spread over the city. Ken woke up in his simple, tidy bedroom. He moved slowly and calmly. In the kitchen, he ground fresh coffee beans and brewed a perfect cup. Carrying the warm mug, he stepped onto his back porch and sat in a wooden chair. He watched the wind move the leaves on the oak trees and breathed in the fresh morning air, feeling light and free from his past. 10 miles away, in the dark and worn part of the city, a cheap alarm clock rang loudly. Callie woke with a start and quickly pressed the snooze button. She lay in her small, cold apartment, staring at the stained ceiling. Slowly, she got out of her uncomfortable bed, her body sore and tired. She put on her old, dirty pants and tied her worn shoes. She walked to the subway station, her breath making little clouds in the cold air. The train was crowded and noisy as it shook and moved through the dark tunnels down to the megacorp basement. Callie sat on a hard plastic seat with tired people all around her. She took a small, cheap notebook and a blue pen from her canvas bag. 6 months ago, she would have filled the pages with big plans for the business and detailed ideas about expanding the company. Now, she opened to a new blank page. She looked at her latest pay slip and saw that 80% of her paycheck was taken away. Callie pressed the pen to the paper. Slowly and carefully, she started to figure out how many years it would take to pay back the $3.2 million she owed. She did the math with care. She moved numbers and decimals around. She planned her weekly shopping down to the last cent, choosing the cheapest peanut butter and counting the cost of the bus ride. Her life had changed completely. She was stuck doing the same thing she once hated Ken for, working hard just to survive. She was now a tired, scared accountant of her own hard life. The train stopped with a loud screech. Callie stood up, holding her notebook tight. She walked into the gray daylight. The heavy metal doors of the megacorp building closed behind her. She walked down the concrete stairs, showed her badge, and sat at cubicle number 414. The blue light from the computer screen lit her pale face. Claim number 8849C. Status denied. Input value 0. She pressed the enter key. Her fingers tapped the keyboard in a steady, dull rhythm that filled the small, windowless room. It sounded like a clock ticking, marking time she could not escape. The screen goes dark as the tapping continued, reminding us how fast, bold dreams can trap us in a life we don't want. If you like this story about tough choices and the cost of going too far, please subscribe to the Infidelity Director channel for more stories with deep meaning. We want to know what you think. Did Callie deserve this hard punishment, or did Ken take things too far? Thank you for watching and supporting us. Remember, real strength does not come from shortcuts or controlling others. It comes from standing quietly and firmly on your own truth.